It all begins with the prestigious sword family that protects the Arcadia Empire, the legendary Cardenas. This incredibly powerful military group maintains peace throughout the empire with its 7 orders of chivalry. Each of these 7 divisions possesses a military strength comparable to that of an entire nation. The elite among them is the Golden Dragon Cavalry, formed only by the direct lineage that carries dragon blood. Members of this main lineage are born with striking blonde hair and glowing golden eyes. Their power is so immense that it truly lives up to the legendary name of the golden dragon they carry. Now, the youths gather to awaken this power and obtain the special abilities called attributes. Even members of the branch families participate, trying to push past their physical limits. All of them test their strength and train hard in the Cardenas family's special training grounds. A blonde youth with golden eyes prepares intensely for combat while holding his weapon. In the middle of the forest, 2 youths begin a direct confrontation, testing their sword skills. The blonde boy remains completely calm, showing that he has total control of the situation. Meanwhile, the girl from the direct lineage with the number 2 on her chest looks quite frustrated. She cannot believe that even attacking as a duo with number 4, they could not win. It becomes clear that her companion was defeated in the blink of an eye by the opponent. She tries to defend herself with all her might, but feels the massive pressure of the enemy attack. At that moment, she panics as she realizes none of her efforts will work. The opponent moves so fast that she is hit head-on without being able to read his movements. He knocks her to the ground and mocks her, saying he cannot believe they belong to the same direct lineage. Standing before her, the boy arrogantly claims that she does not come anywhere near being a worthy opponent. He continues to humiliate the 2 of them, saying they are weak and nothing more than garbage from the branch families. Number 1 declares that the match is over and that he is the grand winner of that selection. The scene cuts to the imposing headquarters of the Cardenas Order of Young Dragons inside. The higher-ups watch everything on a screen and comment that the rookies are very skilled. Commander Fabian asks which of those youths seems most worthy of receiving the special rank. The instructor agrees about the talent of the youths, but says only one of them truly deserves that title. He reveals that it is William, number 1, who defeated numbers 2 and 4 together without taking a single scratch. Fabian asks if the other 2 defeated ones were from the direct lineage, and the instructor confirms they were. When questioned about the rest, the instructor reveals that almost all members of the branch families have already fallen. In the forest, the blue-haired girl laments, surrounded by injured companions who are out of commission. Fabian reflects that the barrier of noble blood is insurmountable, and that the numbers there show who is the strongest. This means number 1 is officially the strongest warrior among all the hundreds of recruits. Because of this, it would be natural to choose number 1, but the commander warns that this time there is no need for comparison. The other officer assumes they should select William for the special slot immediately. However, the bearded instructor asks for patience, causing the commander to question the reason for the delay. He explains that there is still one unusual participant from the branch families left and suggests they evaluate the young man first. The instructor reveals that the mysterious youth is number 25 in the overall rankings. The commander is intrigued to learn that someone from a branch family managed to reach such a high position. Despite recognizing number 25's effort, the leader admits he still falls a bit short of expectations, but he trusts the chief instructor's judgment and agrees there must be an excellent reason for this recommendation. The instructor then states the name of the promising warrior number 25, Leonard Cardenas. He explains that Leonard climbed from number 381 to 25, defeating everyone in his path. The others are shocked by the unbelievable progress, but the instructor asks everyone to look at the screen now. The screen begins to broadcast the exact moment when the decisive duel against number 1 is about to begin. On the battlefield, William notices Leonard's arrival and turns to face the new challenger. William laughs mockingly, saying the rookie has guts to show up there, and warns that he will not go easy on him, unshaken by his opponent's taunts. Leonard simply replies that it is very good to hear that the blonde youth with red eyes adds that, in that case, the MC will not need to hold back in the fight either. Extremely irritated, William releases his magical energy and tells the young man to draw his sword so he can teach him a lesson. Leonard observes calmly and notices that the title of number 1 is not just for show, as his aura is formidable. Smirking, the MC prepares himself and mutters that it is now time to see what the opponent is capable of. Leonard provokes William by calling him to fight, wanting to test how far he can go with his current strength. Without wasting time, William leaps very high toward him to deliver a devastating aerial strike. He yells furiously that he will crush Leonard along with his sword, while the MC just watches calmly. The swords clash with absurd force, generating glowing shockwaves throughout the entire area. William begins to feel the massive pressure and exerts himself to the utmost to maintain his guard. With great agility, Leonard easily dodges a side attack, sliding across the ground. Annoyed by the dodge, William advances again, delivering another heavy sword strike. Leonard looks at his own wooden sword and reflects on the current state of his training weapon. The MC knows very well that his technique prevents the wooden sword from being broken by a mere apprentice. Behind Leonard, the imposing spiritual projection of the legendary Sword Emperor from his past life appears. The two continue exchanging rapid attacks, creating a light show with the clashing of blades. At headquarters, the officers notice that the young man's sword style is extremely rare and completely outside the family standard. The instructor is surprised to realize that the youth wastes no movements and defends everything with minimal effort. The most incredible part is that even under pressure, Leonard has not even begun to truly counterattack. Yet William grows angrier and angrier, calling his opponent a nuisance while trying to hit him by any means necessary. He channels even more energy and yells in frustration, asking if running away is the only thing his opponent knows how to do. In mid-air, Leonard executes impressive acrobatic maneuvers to escape yet another lethal slash. He lands extremely lightly and elegantly on the ground, keeping his combat stance flawless. William attempts a downward strike with all his might, but ends up hitting nothing but air. Desperate for a hit, number one gathers an immense amount of magical energy into his sword. In total contrast, Leonard just raises his wooden weapon calmly, ready to end the match. In a swift and almost invisible movement, the MC passes right by the opponent without taking any damage. While walking away calmly, the MC admits to himself that William's strength is indeed impressive. William turns around, consumed by rage, screaming that he talks too much for someone who only knows how to run from a fight. He furiously demands that Leonard fight seriously, but the MC maintains a cold and indifferent look. Instead of backing away again, this time the young man runs straight toward number one for the final clash. The MC analyzes that the opponent has power and admits that his judgment capability is also good. However, he notes that something essential is still missing for number one to be a complete warrior. Leonard moves like a golden flash, crossing William's path with surreal speed. What William lacks is that sharp combat perception that can only be forged on the brink of survival. The MC concludes that no matter how talented the boy is, he has just hit his own limit. Upon realizing what is happening, number one widens his eyes in complete shock and disbelief. He is struck with pinpoint accuracy from behind, letting out a groan of pain as he loses control of the fight. The other recruits watch incredulously, not understanding how number 25 can fight on equal terms. To those watching, the young man's combat style makes it seem like he is a completely different person. With fluid movements, he advances through the woods looking like an untouchable ghost. William falls into total despair and curses as he realizes he has lost sight of his opponent among the trees. Suddenly, the MC reappears right before him with his sword glowing, leaving the opponent with no time to react. Number one screams, refusing to accept reality, unable to process being bested by someone of a lower rank, with a cold and piercing gaze. Leonard calmly announces number one's defeat in that selection. A gigantic golden slash explodes on the screen, blowing William away with extreme ease. The precise and overwhelming strike completely breaks the opponent's resistance, and he collapses in defeat. The MC knows that his former self could never have done this, but now his situation is entirely different. He has finally recovered all his old memories, bringing back all his combat knowledge. These are the memories of his past life as Ren, the man acclaimed as the world's greatest sword emperor. He was the supreme warrior who walked the path of the sword, achieving the feat of cutting the skies without effort. With his colossal strength, he could destroy entire mountains and earn that legendary title by his own merit. But still unsatisfied, he decided to challenge the terrible heavenly demon, the most powerful being of that era, to a duel. The titanic battle between the two strongest warriors raged fiercely for several consecutive days. The ferocity of this colossal combat completely surpassed all known human limits. They say the intensity of the blows was so devastating that it altered the very map of that region. And the final outcome of this epic confrontation would change the great emperor's fate forever. Under the red light of a giant moon and over completely destroyed ground, the combat finally comes to a close. Ren cannot comprehend his own defeat, as he was certain his swordsmanship was flawless. He asks himself in disbelief why his powerful sword was unable to even scratch the opponent. Smiling superiorly, the demon responds calmly that it all comes down to the absolute fundamentals. He points out that Ren never truly understood the essence of the sword, neglecting the basic concepts. This severe flaw of ignoring the basics ultimately became his fatal weak point in the end. Ren finds it amusing and thinks that saying he lacked basic fundamentals was far too cliché of an insult. He finds everything pointless, though he admits it was impressive to see a mere underdog fight so well. The opponent warns that, with his passing, the legend of Ren would end in absolute defeat. The victor pays his final respects and wishes for the once great emperor to rest in peace. That was the fall of the one who was once known by everyone as the legendary Sword Emperor. As he collapses lifelessly, his final wish is to have just one more chance to start over from scratch. He extends his weak hand toward the sky, feeling life slowly drain from his body. In his final breaths, he wonders if one day his sword would be able to reach the demon. Thus ended the legend of Ren, but at that very instant, a new story began somewhere else. In the middle of the night, some boys panic near a body, asking if he is still breathing. Suddenly, the blonde youth wakes up startled and gasping, pulling air into his lungs with great force. He sits on the ground completely confused, trying to make sense of what is happening around him. Upon realizing he had that same dream again, he is interrupted by someone relieved that he is alive. The other recruits confess they were absolutely certain he had passed away after the severe beating. The young man feels something very strange inside him, while the aggressors decide he seems fine. The bully steps forward to punch him in the face, irritated by the scare the boy had just given them. But to everyone's surprise, Leonard blocks the punch by catching the aggressor's fist without effort. The bully widens his eyes, not understanding how that failure managed to stop his direct attack. His companions watch everything in shock, unable to believe the boy actually stopped the blow. Even Leonard is shocked to realize that his body simply moved on its own to defend itself. He squeezes the aggressor's wrist with extreme firmness, demonstrating an extraordinary physical strength. The assaulted youth becomes infuriated and tries to break free from that tight grip, but fails. He draws his wooden sword in anger, telling the MC not to get cocky because of that. The aggressor screams that it was just beginner's luck and delivers a violent strike against Leonard. In spectacular fashion, Leonard simply leans his body back and dodges the blade with extreme precision. The bully panics upon realizing the boy managed to evade such a fast attack. While dodging, the MC notices with marvel that his bodily reflexes are acting entirely on their own. He ducks easily under the enemy blade and feels that something highly extraordinary is happening. He delivers a well-timed counterattack and knocks the opponent back with a precise impact. Leonard observes the fallen opponent and concludes there is a mysterious force perfectly guiding his movements. The other two bullies tremble with fear, noting that it was not luck and that he is playing with them. A glowing aura begins to envelop Leonard, making him seem like a completely different person. One of them begins to chicken out, but the other tries to maintain his stance and yells at him not to be a coward. The youth advances furiously, refusing to accept that the loser they had just beaten up changed so much in total desperation. The last two aggressors leap together to try and crush the MC at once. The MC gives a confident smile upon realizing he has finally understood the truth about his situation. Holding the wooden weapon firmly, the MC declares with absolute certainty that he has remembered absolutely everything. With a swift and precise strike, he intercepts one of the attackers in midair and kicks him violently to the ground. Right after, he positions himself to finish off the last bully with extreme ease and mastery. The young man recalls that, since he was little, he had always been tormented by those strange and realistic dreams. They were constant dreams of a warrior, with a white cloak and hair fighting bravely under a scarlet sky. Those dreams tormented him so much in the past that he could not focus on his daily training. But now, everything makes sense. With the memories of that past life resurfacing vividly, Leonard realizes he is the direct reincarnation of Ren, the greatest sword emperor from another world. It is hard to believe, but he realizes that the phenomenon of reincarnation is absolutely real. He wonders if his desperate final wish before passing away actually came true. Suddenly, he feels a strong physical discomfort as he processes this unbelievable revelation. He notices that his arms are already sore, just from swinging the sword a little bit. Leonard concludes that this terrible pain is the direct result of having trained the wrong way. With a determined look, the MC decides that things are going to change drastically from now on. Using his techniques and memories from the past, the MC knows he will be able to become infinitely stronger. What Ren failed to achieve in the past, the current Leonard will make happen no matter what. He will use everything at his disposal to become an even greater sword emperor. At the Cardenas barracks, the officers comment that the three injured by Leonard will not be fit for training inside the hall. The recruits gather in small groups to discuss the current situation. One of them assures William that losing those three members will not get in the way of the group's plan. They begin to talk about the young man ranked number 381 who defeated them all alone. William asks with disdain what the ranking numbers of the three who were defeated actually were. His companion replies that the defeated ones were numbers 329, 257, and 133. One of the boys is frightened by the high positions and doubts that number 381 did this alone. He fears that if someone that strong joins another faction, the balance of power will shift completely. Concern grows among them as they realize the threat this new prodigy represents. The group leader orders them to bring number 381 there immediately. William watches from afar and decides he will personally evaluate if the rookie is worth using. The scene flashes back in time, showing the heavenly demon about to reveal an important secret to Ren. He explains that Ren stopped evolving because he began training his internal arts too late in life. The demon claims that if Ren had created that solid foundation when he was still very young, the outcome of that legendary combat could have been completely different in the end. Leonard meditates enveloped in blue flames, remembering that in his past life, he had already passed his prime. But now, the MC has the perfect chance to solidify that firm foundation right from his youth. To begin, the young man focuses on shaping a body capable of enduring and controlling pure mana. He activates a glowing magic circle to accelerate the refining process of his internal energy. Seeing the mystical energy stabilize in his hands, the MC celebrates the success of the procedure. He remembers that, even though he was the best, he suffered from a lack of internal energy when he was young. He looks at the Cardenas crest and wonders what the true secret of this lineage is. The next day, the young recruits gather in the cafeteria for their morning meal. Leonard savors the cafeteria food and thinks the seasoning pleases his palate quite well. The MC knows that proper nutrition is essential for growth and decides to eat very well. Suddenly, a massive shadow looms behind Leonard while he tries to finish his meal. The chubby boy comments on yesterday's fight and asks if the MC has a short temper. He notes with surprise that Leonard used to eat very little, but today he devoured almost everything. The MC asks if he is number 8, but the boy proudly corrects him, saying he is now number 7. He celebrates by saying he defeated the previous number 7, and Leonard understands how the system works. Having no patience for small talk, the blonde asks directly what the boy wants from him. The peer complains about Leonard's cold tone, claiming he had useful information to share. He warns that things are tense because the top-ranked students are trying to expand their influence. The boy slams the table to emphasize the gravity of the recruit's political situation. As Leonard stands up with his tray, his peer reminds him about the power of the direct descendants. He whispers fearfully and asks Leonard to be careful so that others around do not overhear their conversation. Leonard tells him to get straight to the point, leaving his peer intrigued by his sudden change in attitude. The boy insists they need to team up to survive, prompting Leonard to ask what he wants him to do. His peer explains that more than half of the 100 students have already surrendered to them, but anyone can start a group. He reveals the plan to join forces with numbers 3, 9, and himself, inviting Leonard to the group. Without hesitating for even a second, Leonard refuses the invitation and categorically states he will not ally with anyone. The MC thanks him for the useful information and walks away, leaving his training peer completely speechless. The boy is left wondering if Leonard hit his head, since he looks nothing like the old failure. As the sun sets, tinting the sky pink, the MC walks calmly out of the Great Hall. Upon noticing someone approaching in the courtyard, the young man turns and asks if the person has business with him. A voice replies yes, and, in a mocking tone, asks if the cafeteria food was good for number 381. Two lackeys from the rival group approach him, saying they have many things to talk about, but with one priority first. One of them yells authoritatively, announcing that the powerful number 1 ordered him to come immediately. The lackey says they will overlook yesterday's incident, and that number 1 took a liking to him for turning down number 7's invitation. Totally uninterested in that silly power struggle, Leonard tells the lackeys to get lost. Insulted, the lackey snaps furiously, calling Leonard trash and advancing recklessly with his weapon. He delivers an attack with all his might, promising to make the MC bitterly regret his words. With flawless reflexes, Leonard easily dodges the sword strike by slipping under the blade. The opponent is impressed by the blonde's absurd agility, realizing his physical capability is out of the ordinary. Without giving the opponent time to react, Leonard channels energy and lands a devastating palm strike on his chest. The aggressor flies back, shocked by the fact that he was defeated so easily with just bare hands. He collapses on the painful ground, while his wooden sword completely shatters due to the impact. The MC quickly advances toward the second lackey and strikes him with the same implacable precision. As the opponent falls, Leonard catches his number 157 badge in midair with extreme dexterity. Facing the rapid defeat of his allies, the last lackey retreats terrified, trembling with fear of being next. Leonard asks with disdain if he still wants to fight, but the boy yells, telling him to shut up, and advances anyway. Proudly flaunting his number 98 badge, the boy advances, yelling with fury. Promptly answering the opponent's request, Leonard leaps and delivers an implacable finishing blow. A loud thud echoes around the courtyard with the violent fall of the last challenger of that trio. From a high window, a mysterious observer in a blue hood watches everything and comments that Leonard just played with him. The hooded man is intrigued, not understanding if the boy had been hiding his true power. Up until that moment, Leonard notices he is being watched and casts a suspicious glance toward the castle window. The spy gets a big fright upon realizing the blonde youth noticed his presence despite being so far away. He takes down the information and thinks that this training season will have massive and unexpected twists. He writes that he is expecting great things from number 381 from now on. With the new badges obtained in the fight, Leonard Cardenas now officially rises to the number 98 position. Some servants run desperately through the corridors, warning that the new number 98 is heading to the training fields. One of the students runs hurriedly, bumping into others, justifying that he needs to capture number 98 right away. The female vice leader, number 2, overhears the conversation and questions if it was really number 1 who gave that search order. That young blonde girl is Verita Cardenas, the powerful number 2 in the Academy's overall rankings. Walking through the courtyard, she finds it strange that one of number 1's elite subordinates was defeated easily. Suddenly, one of the lackeys is brutally thrown backward right near where the girl was passing. In the arena, several opponents surround Leonard and aggressively demand that he join their faction. Once and for all, Leonard dodges another blow and says he already refused, questioning if their leader is foolish for not understanding a no. The MC lands another precise strike, asking impatiently how many times he will have to repeat the same answer. He rips the number 25 badge from the chest of yet another fallen adversary without any difficulty. While he puts away the victory prize, the defeated opponent curses with anger on the dirt ground. Firm footsteps approach Leonard, and a female voice emerges at the scene to congratulate him on the victory. Verita warns that he has now risen to the number 25 position and asks if he knows their leader. With her golden eyes glowing intensely, she mysteriously claims she can see his energy. She notices the blonde's unusual physical build and the incredibly powerful flow of his magical energy. Verita focuses her gaze on the new number 25 badge that the MC holds firmly in his hands. The young man finds her clairvoyance ability very interesting, noting that she has already mastered the concept of the mind's eye. The MC recognizes that having the mind's eye is a formidable talent and entirely worthy of the number 2 rank. Verita asks with curiosity why he refuses so much to form a group, warning that tomorrow's training will be impossible alone. Suddenly, William appears in the courtyard and interrupts the conversation coldly, saying that is already enough. Number 1, William Cardenas, asks irritably if she went crazy for trying to leak confidential information to a stranger. Without any mercy, William violently kicks one of his own subordinates who failed the mission. He steps on the fallen lackey and curses with hatred, complaining that he had to come personally because his servants are useless trash. Leonard observes William closely and mentally admits that number 1 truly possesses an imposing leader presence. Number 1 begins to walk slowly in his direction, curious to know what kind of warrior the MC is. The two powerful rivals finally stand face to face in the courtyard under the moonlight, measuring their strength through their gaze alone. Leonard challenges him by asking if he wants to fight now, leaving William furious at such audacity coming from a rookie seeing the MC's boldness. Verita begins to laugh out loud and finds his attitude extremely amusing. She confesses with a smile that it is the first time she has seen someone have the guts to speak that way to number 1. Verita concludes that number 25 does not want to ally with anyone and reminds everyone that the grand training begins tomorrow. William decides to turn his back as well, stating he only went there to find out what kind of opponent Leonard was before leaving. Number 1 casts a dark look and threatens him, warning him not to regret provoking him. With total tranquility and unshaken by the threat, the MC simply responds with indifference. The MC knows that this secret training requires students to take the initiative and build their own factions. The next day, in the middle of the great forest, Chief Instructor Bruno asks if all the recruits have already gathered. The young officer confirms with respect that all participants are ready at the agreed location to begin, but he warns with concern that, during the team division, a very unusual participant decided to act alone. Senior Instructor Bruno, intrigued by the unusual situation, seriously orders the young man to explain the details to him. He reports that the recruit in question decided to take the test alone, causing Bruno to question if he actually heard the training rules. The officer confirms he did, explaining that the practical survival test will take place in the vast and dangerous Cardenas forest. He explains that the youths need to fend for themselves regarding shelter and food, and that the normal teams are led by the top 4. The largest faction of all is Squad A, led by number 1, followed by Squad B. Led by number 2, Verita prepares to lead her group with her usual composure and piercing gaze. Squad C is formed by the youths who do not belong to the direct lineage of the main family. Squad D is led by number 4, Dylan Cardenas, a group entirely focused on tactics and strategies. Finally, Squad E gathers all the rejects who could not get into any of the other teams. The officer takes a dramatic pause to reveal the final and most surprising piece of information from the report. He shows the file of number 25, the promising and mysterious Leonard Cardenas. Leonard decided to participate in the dangerous test completely alone, thus creating a one-man Squad F. Upon entering the dense forest, the blonde observes the surroundings and notices that the training ground is immense. While thinking about finding a base soon, Leonard is surprised by instructor Bruno, who asks about his light luggage. Bruno warns that little water and biscuits might not be enough, but Leonard replies that the focus there is precisely survival. The MC knows very well that, in reality, that test is nothing more than a grand badge-stealing competition. Someone approaches and asks instructor Bruno for permission to speak quickly with number 25. Dylan approaches and says that entering that dangerous forest completely alone is a terrible idea. Dylan Cardenas, number 4, offers with a fake smile for the MC to join his Squad D. Having no patience for phoniness, Leonard simply tells number 4 to get lost and mind his own business. The MC knows he is fake and planned to discard him at the first sign of real danger in the forest. Dylan insists, saying that the other teams have dozens of members and that his offer is excellent. Leonard replies that he owes him no explanations and that he simply is not in the mood to participate in a picnic. Dylan says he now understands why number 1 hates him so much and warns furiously that he will regret being so arrogant. He breaks into a fake smile and warns that since he does not want to listen the easy way, he will have to convince him through physical force. Number 4 advances at high speed, delivering a swift sword strike. Demanding that he join the group, Leonard dodges the attack with extreme ease, leaving Dylan shocked to realize he missed the hit. Dylan notices that the blonde's footwork is quite unusual as the MC prepares to strike back. In a fraction of a second, Leonard appears from behind and lands a brutal blow on Dylan's back, who groans in pain. Number 4 realizes with terror that the MC's attack had no malicious intent, acting like a true master. Dylan collapses face first on the ground, completely dazed after Leonard's implacable blow. Senior instructor Bruno praises his movements, but explains that ranking promotion does not count outside the official test and tells him to move along. The MC just nods and responds briefly. Demonstrating his usual disciplined stance, Leonard reflects on instructor Bruno's absurd strength, whose energy level the MC could not even sense beforehand. While running deeper into the forest, the blonde admits that even his past self would have trouble against warriors of that caliber. He recognizes that the grandiosity of all that lives up to the reputation of the continent's greatest swordsman family. Leonard is impressed to see that, even so young, those prodigies have already awakened such absurd talents. He becomes even more convinced that there must be some very well-guarded secret behind the Cardenas blood. Shaking his head to dismiss the thoughts, the MC focuses on the current training and decides to find a safe hiding spot soon. Suddenly, he finds a dark cave in the middle of the woods and notices that it already has a far from friendly resident. In another part of the forest, instructor Bruno demands a full report on the progress of the practical exercise. The officer informs via communication hologram that the clashes between factions started incredibly early this time. He reports that number 1 Squad A attacked Squad C by surprise, defeating their rivals in an implacable and one-sided manner. With the exception of number 3, who managed to escape hastily despite being injured, all the rest of the squad was totally wiped out. Bruno finds number 1's surprise attack strategy quite interesting, considering the massive numerical advantage he possessed. However, he ponders that the arrogant leader probably did not base his decision solely on his army's advantage. Bruno analyzes that a large group would have serious supply problems in the long run, making it ideal to attack right at the start of the test. He broke the pattern by ignoring the search for shelter, proving to be a great master not only in direct combat but in tactics. Understanding the first group's situation, Bruno now requests updates on the actions of Squads B and D. The officer reveals that, knowing of Squad C's defeat, Squads B and D decided to form an alliance to defeat the common enemy. The instructor praises the duo's quick thinking, considering them very promising and intelligent candidates. He then turns sideways and asks the female instructor who was tasked with monitoring the remaining squads in the forest. Quite tense, the young instructor Colin promptly confirms and prepares to give her report to Bruno. She reports that Squad E made no progress, but that the behavior of the solitary number 25 in the forest is bizarre. Colin sighs nervously and confesses she does not even know where to begin explaining the young man's unbelievable actions. The scene shows instructor Colin observing the blonde youth while hiding behind a tree trunk in the forest. She falls into shock upon realizing he called her by name. Even though she possesses the best concealment technique around turning slightly sideways with calmness, the young man just warns with simplicity that he would like to ask her a question. Upon seeing his direct gaze, Colin confirms terrified that the boy really knew of her presence the entire time. Deciding to reveal herself for good, Colin crosses her arms and asks seriously what number 25 wishes to know. He points to the cave and explains that he wishes to use it to sleep, though it seems to already have a dangerous owner. With all the tranquility in the world, the MC asks if that creature inside is a trained family animal. A giant and terrifying blue wolf emerges growling. While Leonard only fears being penalized if he injures or terminates the creature, Colin confirms it is a trained wolf, but strictly warns that it is impossible for a simple recruit to defeat it alone. She thinks about staying ready to save him in case things get ugly, wanting to see if he is just bluffing. She says that if he manages to defeat the beast alone, he will have full permission to use it as he sees fit from then on. Colin lets out a sarcastic smile and adds challengingly, that is, if he can actually beat it. The immense blue wolf advances at high speed, leaping fiercely toward the blonde to tear him apart. Leonard prepares his stance calmly, praising the animal's agility and deciding he will go very light on the force. He executes a spectacular and swift strike, apologizing to the creature for having to evict it from its new home. The giant wolf is hit head-on by the force of the impact and roars in pain upon being subdued by the precise attack. Noticing the hatred in the beast's eyes, the MC realizes the wolf has completely lost its reason and wants to end him. He squeezes the hilt of his sword, reasoning that if he holds back too much and gets hurt, he will end up causing trouble for Colin. Decided to finish this, he moves in, warning that this next blow is going to hurt the creature quite a bit. With a swift and brutal movement of his wooden sword, the blonde delivers another precise slash against the wolf. The wolf tries to advance fiercely with its mouth wide open, but is completely dominated by the young man's technical superiority. He ducks masterfully underneath and whispers that there is no way he would let himself be eaten by an animal like that. He lands a devastating finishing kick on the wolf's jaw, ending the confrontation with immense style. Colin watches the scene with her eyes wide with shock, realizing there would be absolutely no need to save him. She swallows hard and wonders, terrified. If that absurd level of physical strength really belongs to a student, Leonard tells the blue wolf to wait while the beast approaches all excited, wagging its tails. Next, the young man points his index finger at the creature and firmly orders it to sit. To everyone's surprise, the giant wolf obeys instantly and even rolls on the ground when Leonard asks for its paw. Leonard holds the wolf's fur and asks instructor Colin if he can take it along. Since it grew so attached, Colin swallows hard and thinks it would be very difficult to deal with someone so strong who can tame a wolf like that. She then decides to allow the animal's company under the strict condition that it is forbidden from participating in combats. The instructor permits the animal only for transportation and exploration, and Leonard replies that this was already his original intention. Colin asks him to ensure the wolf does not hurt other recruits, and right after disappears using a wind technique, Leonard observes the wind trail left by her, and thinks to himself that such a movement technique seems to be quite useful. He then turns to the blue wolf and tells it to start the real training, ordering the beast to go look for some food. Upon encountering a fork in the forest path, Leonard suggests that the two split into groups to explore better. He explains to his new partner that it can bring back anything interesting it finds, even if it is not food. With a simple command for the wolf to go, the two bolt running in completely opposite directions in the middle of the forest. In another part of the forest, a youth fallen on the ground and trembling with fear whispers, terrified that he just saw a true monster. William Cardenas appears before several defeated recruits and mocks them, saying that such trash does not even deserve to carry the Cardenas family blood. The arrogant leader puts another conquered badge into his pocket, grumbling that he no longer has room to store so many plates. He glares at the young man on the ground and warns that he got lucky today. But the next time they cross paths, he will be eliminated for good. The leader of the defeated squad grinds his teeth in pure frustration and lets out an indignant curse word while watching the enemy walk away. He bitterly laments that even with all of Group E attacking together, they could not even stand up against that guy alone. He panics, thinking that he was only put as the group leader out of obligation, and now does not know what to do to avoid becoming easy prey. His companions ask what to do now, fearing that any attack from another group will mean the definitive end of the line for them. The leader tries to calm everyone's spirits and suggests they pull themselves together to go after some food in the forest. He continues, saying that if they hide and wait for a chance, maybe they can survive, but notices the panicked expressions of his friends. Confused by his team's sudden reaction, the youth asks why everyone is suddenly making those terrified faces. A colossal and monstrous bear appears right behind him, making the young man scream terrified that they really are going to become animal food. The poor fellow begins to run desperately, lamenting that he did not want to have such a horrible and meaningless end in the middle of the woods. Suddenly, Leonard appears running at high speed and leaps toward the giant bear, while the group leader screams in terror. A massive thud echoes through the forest when the furry monster is hit in the head with extreme violence by the surprise attack. The young leader stops running and looks back in total shock upon realizing who it was that appeared to save them from that situation. He stands, paralyzed, observing the savior standing right on top of the giant bear's body that was just completely defeated. The youth finally recognizes that the blonde warrior before him is none other than recruit number 25. He remains in shock on his knees on the ground, unable to believe the absurd level of power he just witnessed right in front of him. He begins to scream dramatically, calling number 25 a heartless rascal and asking what else he wants to steal. The youth continues complaining that he even took the food that would sustain his group for several days, since the giant bear is now gone. He calls Leonard an inhuman monster. While one of his group companions runs to the blonde young man to ask if he is all right, Leonard turns sideways a bit confused by their exaggerated reaction and just lets out an expression of doubt. The recruit repeats the question, wanting to know if the blonde got hurt, and Leonard calmly replies that he is whole and without a single scratch. Hearing that Leonard is fine, the young man says that then there is no problem. But the leader runs after him, wanting to know if he is not going to steal their plates. Leonard looks back indifferently and explains that he only stepped into the situation because the bear seemed too dangerous for them. The MC explains that his only goal there is to train, and that he does not need others' badges because he can secure his own livelihood. Leonard turns his back and adds that if he really wanted to win the test, he would choose his opponents much more carefully. The scene focuses on the forest, while the young leader begins to comprehend the grandiosity of that recruit who rose in rank so fast. Extremely grateful for the unexpected rescue, the young leader lowers his head humbly and says he now owes him a great obligation. He looks at Leonard with respect and sincerely thanks him for preventing his entire squad from being eliminated once and for all. Leonard feels a bit embarrassed and thinks to himself that the young man understood his explanation in a completely distorted way. Suddenly, a heavy thumping sound echoes through the woods, causing the group leader to startle and ask what is coming that way. The sound of heavy footsteps continues as two glowing blue eyes begin to emerge from the dense darkness of the trees. The giant blue wolf appears carrying a passed-out recruit in its mouth, startling the young survivors who observe the scene without understanding anything. The group leader screams in panic upon seeing the monstrous beast, but Leonard just looks at the wolf and gives a calm order for it to sit. To the complete astonishment of everyone present, the giant wolf obeys at that exact moment and sits down well-behaved with the prey still in its mouth. The giant blue wolf drops the passed-out person on the ground, leaving the leader of Group E completely in shock. Looking at the fallen blue-haired girl, the young man realizes with a start that she is recruit number 3. He thinks incredulously that even though number 3 was defeated, she could still survive if she kept her badge. The leader swallows hard, seeing the massive wolf all happy and panting, finding that creature and Leonard himself extremely terrifying. Leonard analyzes the girl's severe injuries and concludes that this could only be the work of a monster or recruits number 1 or 2. He then approaches the young man from Group E and asks if he really does not want to be eliminated from the practical test. The MC offers the giant bear's body in exchange for his badge, assuring him that it will serve as plenty of food for the group. He closes the deal and advises the youths not to get so obsessed with ranking numbers, leaving the leader quite thoughtful. The group leader observes Leonard walking away into the forest alongside his giant blue wolf and mentally repeats the number 25. While the leader thinks that Leonard might be a good person, the MC reflects that he might have misunderstood things. Later, inside a cave, the blue-haired girl begins to open her eyes little by little and notices she is lying on a bed of leaves. She sits up slowly on the improvised bed and asks herself, quite confused, what location in the forest she ended up in. The young girl looks at her own bandaged arm and realizes someone took care of her severe injuries while she was unconscious. Leonard appears by her side and asks if she finally woke up, startling the girl who had not noticed his presence in the cave. In a swift reflex, she tries to land a powerful kick, but Leonard manages to block the attack easily using his arm. He comments that her leg seems to be working very well, but advises her not to waste unnecessary energy and rest. The blue-haired girl stands up furious and immediately demands that the young man return the badge that belongs to her. Leonard just ignores her aggressiveness and begins to walk away in silence, leaving the young girl even more irritated. She explains that she is grateful for being saved, but makes it clear she will not give her badge, to which Leonard replies he never planned to take it. The young man extends a skewer of roasted meat right in front of her and tells her to sit down to eat and recover her strength. He tells her not to be shy because there is still plenty of food, thinking to himself that he would never let a child go hungry. While she eats, Leonard asks if she was from Squad C and questions what happened for her to get so badly hurt. The MC wants to know if her group ended up running into some dangerous monster, but the girl replies sadly, no. With her teeth clenched in pure rage, she begins to recount that everything happened right after they set up their base in the forest. She recalls with bitterness that her squad suffered a brutal ambush and was completely wiped out without having the slightest chance to fight. The girl laments in shame for not being able to do anything as a leader, while Leonard recognizes they truly stood no chance. Leonard explains that facing many enemies at the same time is difficult due to their lack of experience, but assures her there are ways to win. He analyzes that ambushes and surprise attacks are extremely efficient against young, inexperienced people without tactical knowledge in the forest. Leonard then looks directly at the blue-haired girl and asks if her right arm was put out of commission by recruit number 1. She confirms it and says number 1 is on a level far above number 2. While Leonard reflects on that squad's strength quite frustrated, she screams that one of her allies did not even get the chance to fight properly before ending up defeated. Noticing that her fighting spirit remains intact even after the humiliating defeat, Leonard flashes a slight smile of approval. The blonde thinks she could become a great warrior in the future, while the girl comments that the current situation is extremely bad. Leonard deduces that the collapse of squads B and D is only a matter of time, and the young girl supposes they might have formed an alliance. He ponders that the morale of whoever is winning is massive, and begins to outline an ambush strategy to balance the contest. However, the young man knows the enemy will certainly be prepared for that, lamenting that the opponent goes so far against children. The blue-haired girl suggests they aim directly at the opposing squad's weak point to have any chance of victory. She explains that the best combat strategy is to focus absolutely all attacks on recruit number 1 all at once. The young girl details that the entire enemy squad revolves around him as a central pillar, making their decisions and unity very fast. The girl makes the gesture of knocking down the main piece on the board, indicating that eliminating the leader will destroy the group's entire structure. She concludes that the moment the main pillar is broken, all the rest of the group will turn into nothing more than a disorganized mess. Leonard notices that she deeply desires to get revenge on number 1, and the young girl confirms with determination that she definitely wants to pay him back. With a serious and confident look, the MC asks the blue-haired girl to trust him so they can carry out the plan. Surprised by the blonde's firm attitude, she asks if she should start calling him squad leader from that moment on. In another part of the forest, a large group of recruits marches united, while the leader comments that one of their allies took a long time to return. Recruit number 5 asks for calm and says time is their best ally, guaranteeing victory if the current situation continues like this. He adds arrogantly that the final results of the practical survival test should become very clear in a very short time. Suddenly, one of the guard soldiers raises his fist and shouts in maximum alert for everyone to stop and immediately prepare for battle. The order to prepare for combat quickly echoes through the entire formation of soldiers, who take their defensive positions among the trees. William appears calmly wielding his sword and mocks their attempt to hide, suggesting they surrender once and for all. The squad hidden in the forest hears a clear order coming from among the trees for everyone to stop concealing themselves and show up. Verita Cardenas and Dylan Cardenas step out of the bushes with their respective squads and ask ironically if they were noticed. Dylan gives a mocking smile and says, "The majestic lion," referring to William, has a much sharper sense of smell than he imagined. He walks calmly alongside Verita and jests, asking if that sharp scent of William's wouldn't actually be just like a dog's. William points his sword to the ground and mocks, saying that true leaders at the top can easily read the minds of the rabble below. The arrogant leader of Squad A glares at the two rivals with superiority, irritated to think that people of that level dared to challenge him. While Verita observes everything coldly, William adds sharply that they are nothing more than a big stain on the Cardenas surname. Verita takes a step forward and questions if he always liked being arrogant so much, comparing William's pompous way to that of a peacock. Extremely angered by the taunts, William replies sharply that it is called dignity and calls her a completely incompetent woman. Without wasting any more time on talk, the leaders of the two groups advance violently and collide their wooden swords with force. Verita's squad initiates a mass charge in the forest, receiving direct orders to attack and completely annihilate Squad A. Recruit number 5 reacts quickly and commands his allies to reinforce the defenses so they do not allow the enemy formation to be broken. A chaotic and violent confrontation begins to spread across the entire battlefield, with both squads fighting bravely among the trees. Verita and William exchange rapid sword strikes, and she wonders intrigued what true special attribute that monster possesses. She blocks his attacks with difficulty, feeling her wrists throb with the weight of each swift blow that her eyes can barely see. Verita observes her adversary's surreal speed and wonders in total shock what he truly is. To have that level of power, Dylan takes advantage of the distraction to launch a surprise attack from the side, screaming that he will expose the rival's attribute once and for all. To Dylan's surprise, William blocks the attack with immense ease, using just one hand to hold his wooden sword. William activates a powerful electrical energy in his arm and goes after Dylan implacably to end the combat quickly. Dylan screams in pain upon being struck by William's overwhelming electrical discharge. Becoming completely vulnerable in the middle of the confrontation, William takes advantage of the situation and slams his rival violently against the forest floor, knocking out number 4 with extreme ease. Seeing William's movement, Verida notices a perfect opening and advances at high speed to deliver a fatal blow against him. She predicts his muscle movements and tries to attack from behind, but realizes too late that that obvious opening was a trap. The young girl panics upon comprehending that William was planning to lure her into that vulnerable position since the start of the combat. William turns quickly and delivers a spectacular counterattack, blocking Verida's sword with an impact that makes the air tremble around them. The leader mocks, saying she is at least a bit better than number 4, but complains that she was too slow to notice the play. He forces his sword against hers and says that even those eyes of hers are not perfect, because her movements seem extremely slow. William glares at her with arrogance, and adds that her agility doesn't even compare to that of recruit number 25. With a devastating blow, he completely breaks Verida's defense and knocks her to the ground without giving the girl any chance to react. William looks down at the fallen rival and mocks, saying that despite all the provocation from before, she was nothing but a very weak challenge. He demands that number 2 admit her defeat already, stating with conviction that she could never beat him anyway. William proudly declares himself the grand winner of that training, but is interrupted by a voice saying that judgment is premature. The blonde and Verida look back surprised and run right into Leonard, who appears walking calmly while dragging a recruit by the collar. William falls into shock upon recognizing that the youth before him is the mysterious recruit, number 25, everyone was talking about. Quite irritated, William yells, asking what he is doing there, and Leonard replies with indifference that it is nothing special. Leonard throws the passed-out recruit on the ground and warns that he came to return what William did to his group, leaving the leader stunned to see number 5. William rants furiously that Leonard shouldn't even have a squad and tells the young man to stop saying nonsense so as not to make him laugh. With all the tranquility in the world, the MC looks right into his rival's eyes and calmly replies that he really didn't have one at the beginning. Suddenly, a piercing war cry echoes through the forest, startling William, who looks back quickly without understanding what is going on. The leader of Group E appears running at the head of a large army of low-ranked recruits, advancing with fury against the adversaries. The army of recruits considered weak collides violently with William's allies, initiating a true revolt on the battlefield. The leader of Group E proudly displays a conquered badge and shouts that this is the great rebellion of the weak that William despised so much. The scene shows the previous moment when the leader realized that the giant bear's meat would be enough to keep his entire group safe. He celebrates joyfully alongside his teammates. But the celebration is interrupted by Leonard, who asks for permission to speak. The leader took a huge scare, seeing Leonard accompanied by recruit number 3, asking what was happening so suddenly. Startled, the young man asks if the blonde wants the food back, but Leonard extends his hand and proposes they form a squad alliance. The leader gets confused and argues that his group is too weak and that they would just be a burden, but Leonard asks if he already forgot. The MC steps closer and reminds them that he asked them not to get tied down by numbers, because everyone there is a warrior trained by the Cardenas family. Leonard explains that numbers are just labels and that everyone grows at the same pace, but the leader fires back, saying they will never be equal. Leonard closes his eyes and states with conviction that because they inherit the Cardenas family blood, everyone possesses plenty of talent and potential. Leonard explains that those who manifest attributes are an absolute minority, and that, besides that, everyone's real strength is basically equivalent. The blonde points to himself and to number 3 as examples, explaining that she is from a branch of the family and made it far with effort. He highlights that he did the same by climbing from position 381 to 25, and asks if those numbers don't prove his point. The leader of Group E loses his patience and yells that they have low rankings because they are incapable of winning, being considered the garbage of Cardenas. He screams with all the force of his lungs, stating dramatically that the true problem for all of them there is not just the lack of physical strength. Leonard counters, saying that what they truly lack is courage and self-confidence, questioning if they have ever tried to push past their limits even once. The MC asks if they have already made a firm decision to win, and warns that if they still don't believe in themselves, he will believe for them. He clenches his fist firmly and guarantees they can win, officially proposing a grand alliance of Class F with the members of Class E. Leonard extends his hand in a friendly manner to the leader and makes the final invitation for everyone to unite into a single group to defeat the feared number 1. Back to the present, number 3 leads the charge triumphantly, screaming for everyone to attack and conquer victory for number 25. From atop a rock, the girl observes William, who furiously accuses her of allying with inferiors and asks if she feels no shame in that. With a confident smile, number 3 tells him to listen well and reminds him of when she tried to kick Leonard and he stopped her blow with just one hand. She states with her head held high that number 25's movements and combat techniques are infinitely more refined than William's. The girl adds that she just followed someone stronger and provokes William, saying his strength doesn't mean the rest of his group is strong. She points to the battlefield and tells her rival to look at how her squad is crushing his subordinates without the slightest difficulty. Verita finds the situation extremely amusing and begins to laugh out loud, while Leonard just observes her reaction with a confused expression. The number 2 kneels in a friendly manner before Leonard, announcing her surrender and asking to join Squad F as well. Sitting on the ground and without strength to continue the fight, Dylan raises his hand and warns that he will also do exactly the same thing as Verita. The number 4 smiles awkwardly and admits he prefers to surrender to them than end up losing to someone arrogant whom he simply cannot stand. William watches the scene with his teeth clenched in pure rage, incredulous to realize that even number 4 decided to abandon him at that moment. The leader of Squad A rants furiously at his allies, asking if they possess no pride for carrying the Cardenas family blood. Dylan tells William to stop being stubborn and admit defeat once and for all, leaving the blonde even more furious and indignant at the situation. With his gaze overflowing with hatred, William points his wooden sword directly in Leonard's direction and yells for number 25. He challenges the MC to a decisive duel right there, putting the fate and victory of all members of both squads on the line. William shouts, enraged for him not to dare run from the confrontation, promising he will make his rival feel the massive difference in power between them. Leonard flashes a very confident smirk and replies calmly that this was already his intention. Since the start of the exercise, the MC holds the hilt of his wooden weapon and adds that in reality, those words of challenge were his for the rival. Leonard assumes his combat stance and challenges William to come at him with everything, promising to make him understand reality once and for all. Through the monitoring screens, Senior Instructor Bruno observes the start of the decisive duel and comments that that is the true final battle. Quite anxious about the combat, Instructor Colin wonders if the favorite number 1 will win or if the new rising star will manage to turn the game. She waits anxiously to witness the emergence of a warrior worthy of becoming a captain. While the two rivals clash their swords fiercely, William attacks with overwhelming fury, delivering extremely heavy sword strikes endowed with a destructive power out of the ordinary. Leonard notices the enemy's absurd strength and praises number 2 for managing to resist those impacts that tire the arms quickly. William maintains the offensive pressure with a confident look, but Leonard continues coldly analyzing every movement of his adversary in combat. The blonde reasons that, despite the extreme strength, the adversary is still just an ordinary recruit with attack trajectories that are very easy to predict. Suddenly, Leonard is caught off guard by a gust of wind and a strike coming from a totally bizarre direction that forces him to retreat, surprised. He understands instantly that it was exactly with that attack from a totally unexpected angle that William managed to defeat number 2. From outside the forest, Senior Instructor Bruno watches the broadcast of the duel intently and confesses he is very surprised by what he sees. Bruno is impressed by Leonard's ability to figure out and react with such speed to the powerful number 1's mysterious technique. The senior instructor reflects, surprised to note that a recruit without special attributes was capable of performing a feat that even number 2 failed to do. In the middle of the exchange of blows, Leonard notices that the adversary is not attacking just with the physical strength of his arms during the sword duel. The narrative reveals that William's special attribute is psychokinesis, an invisible and formless power that he manipulates with mastery. William and Leonard continue exchanging high-speed attacks, making sparks fly across the entire setting with the collision of the blades. The power allows William to deliver strikes with the sword from bizarre trajectories and angles, where it would theoretically be impossible to put force. He uses telekinesis to infuse energy into his arms invisibly, surprising his adversaries with blows of devastating potency. This is a fantastic supernatural ability that completely challenges all combat common sense and known physical rules. William becomes furious to note that the MC managed to dodge his attacks, screaming with hatred because he deciphered the secret of his power. A massive thud echoes through the clearing when the swords of the two warriors collide again with a force that shakes all the surrounding vegetation. William glares at Leonard from very close in the middle of the clash of blades and realizes, shocked, that his rival has been concealing his real strength the entire time. The irritated number 1 completely loses control and yells enraged at his adversary, demanding to know the reason he hid his power. Leonard glares at his rival with his glowing red eyes and calmly says he will let his own sword answer that question for him. A majestic image represents the combat tradition of the Cardenas family, highlighting the great honor that befits the lineage of the Duke of the Sword. William gives a challenging smile upon hearing his opponent's resolute answer and exclaims with enthusiasm that he very well accepts that duel number 1 uses his invisible attribute to shoot a powerful wave of slashing energy from a distance, surprising Leonard, who leaps to dodge. The MC realizes his rival also knows how to use telekinesis for long-range strikes, concluding that his position as number 1 is not by chance. William attacks laughing and tells him not to take it personally. While Leonard masterfully dodges and comments that his rival flaunts a lot of confidence, Leonard assumes his combat stance with the sword and challenges William to show what he is truly capable of when he uses all his true power. The arrogant leader of Squad A accepts the challenge on the spot and releases a massive amount of his attribute energy, which envelops his body in blue. The MC reflects that he cannot release all his old strength in that weak body, and that he also shouldn't draw attention with external energy. Leonard takes a deep breath, concentrates the flow of mana, and realizes that all he can do at that moment is focus solely on his combat with the sword. With an intense and focused gleam in his red eyes, the blonde makes the final decision to charge at his adversary to take him down for good. William notices his rival's incredible speed and praises his foot agility while trying to hit him with fast slashes of blue energy. Number 1 delivers another energy slash with all his might in Leonard's direction, challenging him to try and dodge that overwhelming attack. The blast of power passes scraping past the MC and hits a massive tree trunk head-on, which ends up completely split in half. Leonard executes a spectacular acrobatic movement in the air to escape the blow and lands lightly, making his adversary huff with anger at the miss. Observing from afar, Dylan comments surprised that now he finally understands the reason he could not clearly see William's attribute. Dylan explains to Verita that the leader used a trick to make his attribute invisible, causing the girl to complain indignantly about how cowardly he was. The number 4 points out that number 25 is dodging everything, and jokes that the blonde is the one who seems cowardly for concealing his real power. The number 3 counters with anger, saying Leonard can't even get close to William and questions how he could be being cowardly there. Dylan analyzes with more attention and corrects his statement upon noticing that, contrary to how it seems, the MC is getting closer to William little by little. In the broadcast booth, Bruno's young assistant comments that Leonard seems to just be running to escape, but guarantees it is all on purpose. Senior instructor Bruno agrees and adds that the young man is simulating a retreat just to corner William without his adversary noticing. He compares Leonard's calculated movements to those of a fierce predator that calmly corners its prey in the middle of a forest hunt. Bruno points out that the young man is narrowing the distance gradually, while William begins to sweat nervously upon noticing the constant approach. Suddenly, the blonde appears right before William in a surprising manner, leaving number 1 terrified to notice that sudden proximity. With a totally serene and focused gaze, Leonard calmly warns his adversary that the duel is over and that he is the grand loser of the fight. The MC delivers a spectacular sword slash that shatters the enemy barrier and throws the powerful number 1 backward with immense violence. William flies far, spitting blood, completely in panic and unable to believe that he, the best recruit, was defeated in that brutal manner. He despairs while falling to the ground, finding it inadmissible to have been bested by someone he considered far inferior to himself at the beginning. A massive curtain of dust and smoke rises at the location where the body of the arrogant leader of Squad A collided against the trees with extreme force, fallen in the middle of the debris. William reflects incredulous on his defeat and bitterly realizes that that actually represents much more than losing. He looks up and feels a terrible chill upon noticing Leonard's imposing presence looming over him like a true ghost of destruction. With the tip of the wooden sword pointed right in the middle of his forehead, William feels a terrible sensation of danger and thinks his end has arrived. Leonard maintains his stance and holds the sword firm close to William's face with a serene expression of someone who completely dominated the situation. Realizing he has no more way to react to the final blow, William lets out a tired sigh and lets slip a weak laugh of pure acceptance. The defeated leader looks at Verita and number 3 by his side and resigns himself to the fact that he lost the duel to the fearsome number 25. An explosion of celebration echoes through the location when all the recruits from the low classes begin to cheer and celebrate that the MC won in the control room. Senior instructor Bruno lets out a sigh of admiration and comments that that was a truly impressive twist. William sits on the ground and thanks Leonard, calling him now number 1 and saying he feels much lighter after having faced him in the fight. Leonard lowers his sword and asks in a confused way what his adversary means by that. While observing his peaceful facial expression, William recalls with bitterness his father's oppressive upbringing and the constant pressure he felt to be the strongest warrior of everyone there. The young man confesses with a slight smile on his face that all that weight and those old suffocating convictions were completely eliminated from his mind. He just extends his hand to Leonard and says, "It is nothing special," demonstrating that he accepted his defeat with much dignity in the end of everything. The blonde lies on the ground and praises his opponent for playing an excellent match, while the MC extends his arm to help him get up. Leonard lets out a long sigh of relief and closes his eyes, tired but satisfied for managing to close that exhausting battle in the woods. William grabs Leonard's hand firmly to stand up, sealing a relationship of mutual respect after the closing of that grand duel. Meanwhile, in the external observation area, the other recruits comment in absolute shock that they cannot believe number one's defeat. Some students begin to complain indignantly for having placed their bets on the favorite William and now being completely broke. Senior instructor Bruno crosses his arms and smiles satisfied, commenting that, despite the unexpected result, that test brought excellent fruits. Bruno officially announces the conclusion of the test, and all the recruits lift Leonard on their shoulders to celebrate, leaving the boy exhausted and speechless. Dylan comments that, leaving number 25 aside, he was extremely surprised by Squad E's actions, and Verita totally agrees with him. Verita says she never would imagine that the MC would ally with those weaker recruits just to manage to defeat William's squad. A senior instructor, Bruno observes everything with his arms crossed and analyzes that Leonard managed to perfectly comprehend the real intention of the practical test. He tells Colin that the result was unexpected but very satisfying and tells her to organize everyone's return as soon as the youths calm down in the woods. Bruno tells the female instructor to notify the main residents of the family that the moment has finally arrived to start the important coming-of-age ceremony. Later in the forest, Leonard pets the giant blue wolf's snout and explains with sadness that he will depart the next day, but won't be able to take it along. The immense beast lays its head on the ground and begins to whimper softly in a sad way, demonstrating how much it will miss its new master's company. The blonde pets the pet animal's snout and asks gently if the big wolf really got sad to see him depart the camp. Sitting next to the wolf under the light of the full moon, Leonard says he feels the same, and the gigantic animal responds, giving joyful barks at the top of the cliff. The MC apologizes for having to leave it behind in the forest, but makes a very sincere promise to his massive four-legged companion. With a warm smile on his face, Leonard promises the animal that he will get much stronger and that he will certainly come back to get it when the moment arrives. The blonde guarantees that the two will play a lot again in the future, leaving the giant blue wolf extremely happy and panting with so much joy. He begins to walk away and tells the wolf to make sure to stay plenty strong to manage to keep up with his pace when he returns. The wolf howls imposingly to the full moon, while Leonard thinks to himself that he will give a fine name to the creature the next time the two meet inside a travel carriage. The top 5 recruits of the academy are sitting face to face in an absolute and quite uncomfortable silence. William loses his patience and questions irritably what everyone is doing there, grumbling that there were no orders to board the carriages by ranking number. The number 3 replies laughing that she just followed the leader, and Verita adds saying she traveled there because the big star of the day ended up landing in William's group. Dylan smiles and says he just wanted to talk a bit with the young man who managed to climb in ranking, coming from the bottom of the barrel, leaving Leonard embarrassed. William asks arrogantly if they think he is too focused on studies, irritating Verita and number 3 with his disdainful reaction before the girls. The number 25 ignores the taunts and warns Leonard that he has something very important to tell him, leaving the MC curious. Astonished by William's change, number 3 asks sarcastically if the leader hit his head very hard on the ground, making the blonde tell her to shut her mouth. William tells her to listen in silence and explains that tomorrow everyone will receive supplies according to the performance they had in the practical training. The blonde warns that first the awakening ceremony of the Cardenas blood will be held, leaving Leonard quite thoughtful about what that means. William details that their lineage possesses exclusive organs and that the ceremony will serve to awaken them. Focusing all future training on that, Dylan comprehends the logic of the old basic training and questions what exactly happens to a warrior's abilities after this awakening. He adds saying that the manipulation of mana will become free and explains that that was why they banned spiritual fruits and stones from the initial tests. The narrative details that, after the ritual, the recruits conclude the basic preparatory phase and finally enter for good into the coveted Order of Young Dragons. Dylan admits surprise that that military order is news to him, and William explains that the organization has not been officially announced to the public yet. He details that the order focuses on real combat and prepares the new generation of elites with personalized training for each youth to experience the real world. The blonde explains that recruits are categorized by grades and special organs, making Leonard question if those organs are different for each one. William confirms and details that those organs are called monocores, and that attributes and quantities vary according to the individual. The number 3 comments with excitement that legend has it that dragon blood runs in the family's veins, though no one knows if it is real. William adds that having fewer monocores is much better, with a single core being the best of all because it guarantees an incredible training efficiency. The youth proudly boasts that he is the owner of a single core, making Dylan think to himself that the blonde should stop being so full of himself. Verita and Dylan mock him and ask Leonard not to take him seriously, reminding him that a single core prodigy is only born once every 10 years. Leonard remembers his past life and ponders over the concept of soul sources he mastered in the past, which were divided into 5 elements. The boy asks if there are 5 cores in total, and Verita confirms in a serious way that a pentacore would be the worst existing type to train. Verita explains that each extra core requires double the resources and hinders energy balance, causing a drastic drop in efficiency. She makes a detailed calculation showing that a double core requires 4 times more energy, a triple requires 9 times, and a quadruple 16. The young girl adds saying that a pentacore requires a frightening 25 times more effort, labeling those numbers as something terrifying. Verita says Leonard should know that from theoretical classes and asks if the number 1 is that uninterested in theory, leaving him awkward. The number 3 and Verita mock together, commenting in a joyful way that whoever is extremely strong in real combats doesn't need to worry about theory. Leonard reflects in silence that the old method from his past can work in that world, concluding that mastering all cores would leave him invincible. Dylan ponders that, in theory, a pentacore would be the strongest, but warns that getting enough resources to train it is an impossible task. The MC concludes that having more cores is bad, and that he would prefer to have at most a triple, because being a single core would draw unwanted attention. However, the official evaluation reveals in shock that Leonard possesses the terrible pentacore, lamenting that the heir lacks the lineage's talent. The blonde looks out the window of the immense mansion and thinks ironically that he did manage to stand out in the selection, but for the worst reasons possible. Walking alone through the grand corridors of the castle, Leonard deeply laments upon realizing that things went totally outside his plans. He puts his hand on his head with extreme frustration, trying to find a way to deal with that problematic diagnosis of his mana. The MC focuses his red gaze toward the horizon through the window, determined to find a solution to overcome yet another obstacle. Leonard masterfully dodges a series of green energy projectiles that are shot against him in the middle of the immense hall. A man in armor watches the scene, impressed by the young man's agility, and praises the ease with which he evades the blows. The man comments that it is fantastic to see someone at such a young age be capable of seeing the trajectory of that magic sword. He approaches, revealing that the rumors about Recruit 381 were real, introducing himself as Fabian, commander of the order. Leonard introduces himself formally as the former number 381. Receiving praises for achieving such a high level of mastery, Fabian shows himself surprised to note that the young man managed to achieve such a high level of mastery without even needing to use his aura energy. The young man replies in a humble way, questioning if the path of the sword wouldn't be something built purely with the heart and polished with the body. He adds, saying he always believed that the awakening of the energy aura had no direct relation to the conclusion of someone's martial arts. Fabian finds the young man's stance sensational and lets out a rowdy laugh, giving friendly pats on the new prodigy's shoulder. The commander states joyfully that the rumors were wrong and, in fact, underestimated him. Praising the boy's excellent attitude, he introduces himself officially as Fabian, commander of the Order of Young Dragons and Swordmaster, swearing to honor his title for him. The commander guarantees that Leonard is fully worthy of special class status and promises to give him the best possible treatment. From then on, Fabian's assistant whispers, worried, reminding him that Leonard was just revealed as a pentacore in the evaluation ceremony. Fabian reprimands the subordinate on the spot, exclaiming in an energetic way that the quantity of mana cores has not the slightest importance in combat. The commander teaches that true greatness doesn't care about trifles, and advises the MC to simply not care about what they say. He delivers a valuable item to Leonard, explaining that it is a spatial bag well filled with resources for him to use whenever he needs. Fabian adds that, as part of the elite treatment, he will give the blonde the exclusive right to choose his own initial training location. He points to the large magic doors of the hall and tells the young man to choose his destination, revealing that each portal leads to a different training area. Fabian says that normally they would choose based on level, but he will make an exception for the blonde to autonomously decide his path. Leonard carries his luggage and asks which of those training locations offers the most suitable resources for his current power level. Fabian praises the excellent question and gives a friendly slap on his back, stating that whoever avoids the path of suffering is not a martial artist. The commander points to a door enveloped in dark energy and says that, in that case, the ideal destination for the blonde will be the feared island of Calabogos. The narrative explains that Calabogos is known for being the most isolated and dangerous training island in the entire Empire territory. The location is a wilderness so brutal that even veteran and experienced knights quickly give up on training there. Besides all the hostile climate, certain areas of that island are considered so dangerous that they are practically treated as demon territory. Fabian asks if he is anxious, and Leonard politely thanks him for the great consideration before extending his hand to open the magic portal. The MC reflects that the reason the Pentacore is considered impossible to train is because ordinary people do not know the correct method of cultivation. He knows that the 5 elements work as a single flow, and that, if he can raise all together, he will have a fantastic opportunity for evolution. The young blonde gives a determined smile, thinking that that is the golden chance for him to surpass even the power level of his past life. Fabian wishes good luck to the young man, while watching Leonard carry his heavy backpack and cross the portal of light toward his destination. Upon stepping out of the magic portal, Leonard shields his face against the bright glare and realizes he has finally arrived at his new training destination. The young man runs right into an immense forest of gigantic trees, confirming that he just stepped onto the sacred soil of the feared island of Calabogos. Suddenly, a deep voice coming from behind startles him, giving a welcome, forcing the MC to turn quickly on guard. Leonard is impressed by the stealth of the mysterious warrior in a green cloak, who asks if he is the famous recruit everyone talks about. The long-haired man questions if he is really the legendary rookie from the rumors, leaving the blonde a bit surprised by that reception. Demonstrating much respect, the youth makes a polite bow and introduces himself formally as Leonard to the warrior in front of him. The warrior introduces himself as Bradley, the senior knight tasked with managing the island and leader of the Order's first squad. Called Basilisk Bradley, suggests that the two change locations and asks if the MC has already had the opportunity to meet the island's other veterans. While they walk, the knight explains that everyone here is an apprentice, and that despite having the same status, Leonard must demonstrate respect to the veterans. Bradley adds that there is no reason to be afraid, as there is a strict rule on the island that forbids the older ones from interfering with the rookies. He explains that Leonard will spend the first 6 months under his direct protection and the rest of the year training in a totally independent way. The veteran warns that normally he wouldn't take care of rookies, but he will make an exception because he is special class and will give him a room to sleep. Bradley points to a wooden cabin and offers the room for the blonde to rest. Receiving a polite thank you from Leonard for the kindness, he warns that for the rest, the young man must be autonomous, and that with enough spiritual stones, he can obtain everything he needs on the island to survive. Bradley gives a smirk and says that that is all the basic explanation, asking if Leonard was left with any doubt about the rules. The young blonde questions what would be the real practical difference between the initial protection period and the training period that will come after. The tutor explains that in protection, he will support all activities, while in training, he will only guarantee that the others do not try to assault the rookie. Leonard asks if there are strict rules against injuring or terminating others on the island, and Bradley responds in a serious way that assassinations are forbidden. The blonde understands the message and asks a final question, requesting the instructor to evaluate the real market value of all the resources he received. Bradley opens the spatial bag and stands in absolute shock to see that the blonde received 3,000 spiritual stones and 100 elixirs of each attribute type. Bradley finds it strange that Leonard, being from a branch family, received so many resources that not even someone from the direct lineage would easily get from the commander. The blonde asks what a spiritual stone is, and Bradley explains that it is an ore filled with mana used to absorb energy and expand the core. Bradley says that with all that, a single core would reach the 10th stage and a pentacore would reach the 5th, leaving Leonard confused about what those stages are. Bradley decides to explain that and says he will teach him to identify a cultivator's levels, revealing that martial artists are divided into 5 great realms. He adds that each of those great realms possesses 10 smaller stages, and advancing through them is what brings the cultivator closer to becoming a true warrior. The first great level presented is the body tempering realm, focused on strengthening the warrior's physical structure. In it, one uses mana to expand the core, while the second level is the external power realm, where the warrior trains to release his strengthened mana as an aura. The third level is the individuality refinement realm, also known as transcendence, which varies from person to person and therefore is hard to define. Then comes the half-god realm, a state that surpasses the limits of the mind and allows the martial artist's own imagination to directly interfere with the physical world. Bradley continues explaining that, in the 5th and final level, the cultivator finally transcends humanity itself and achieves the state of godhood. This supreme level is called the Divine Realm, where the warrior's power reaches heights comparable to those of a god. The tutor reveals that no one has ever managed to reach this legendary level, except for the family's first ancestor, Cardenas. He gets annoyed mentioning that some fools claim this story is a lie, forgetting they would be slaves if the ancestor hadn't defeated the evil dragon. Bradley ends the theoretical explanations there and says now is the moment to finally start the training for real. He instructs the blonde to start with mana cultivation, using the received resources to strengthen his physical abilities and expand his core. With a smile, the tutor explains that it is a very simple training exercise where the youth only needs to absorb the pure energy from the spiritual stones. Bradley wishes good luck and warns he will leave him alone to train, which makes Leonard quite confused and question his attitude. The instructor leaves and closes the wooden door, wishing luck once more while the MC sits on the floor without understanding anything. Leonard looks at the spiritual stones scattered in front of him and begins to reflect on the energy absorption process. He notices that the ambient mana is abundant and that he could train just by walking around there, which makes him question if absorption itself is a difficult task. The young man clenches his fist firmly and thinks that if the problem is only that, he is in great luck. With a confident and determined look on his face, Leonard gives a slight smile, ready to initiate his cultivation in the cabin. Time passes and night arrives, making Leonard find it strange and wonder if the process should be this fast. Even with him already being experienced, the young man's arm begins to glow intensely with a golden energy, and his veins pop as the power flows through his body. He is impressed to manage to reach the 3rd stage in a few hours, and realizes that, at this pace, he could reach the 5th stage in just one day. Lying on the floor, he reflects that his memories from his past life made everything easier, because the pentacore works just like the 5 elements and this method was very basic. Leonard realizes that finishing everything in a single day would be far too suspicious and contemplates the idea of isolating himself in the mountains to train for a few days. But he soon reconsiders, remembering that the commander of the Knights already has the firm conviction that he is an unmatched genius. The blonde gives a sly smile, thinking that if he masters the techniques from his previous life now, he can perfectly fit into this genius reputation. Suddenly, the scene changes to the outside of the cabin, where 3 veteran recruits with dark uniforms appear observing the training location. They comment that it is impressive the fact that the rookie has been locked in there for so long, confirming that 1 month and a half has already passed since he entered. One of them deduces that the rookie intends to come out only when he reaches the 5th stage, the minimum to survive there, drawing a sorrowful comment from his companion. Having no time to worry about the rookie, the group decides to hurry and go fishing before the day ends. They complain that if they don't catch anything, they will have to spend spiritual stones, joking that their skill is goblin level, which generates a playful complaint. The veteran fires back, saying they should at least manage to defeat orc level, so as not to experience so much embarrassment. While the young men comment that both monsters are the weakest in that region, the cabin's wooden door begins to slowly open with a creak. Giving a long sigh of relief, the young man finally takes his first step out of the cabin after all that time of isolation. While adjusting his red tie, Leonard thinks if it is already the ideal moment to ask Instructor Bradley for a real sword. Bradley's voice emerges, asking if the young man really wants a real sword, revealing that he was nearby observing the youth. The instructor questions the reason for the request, and Leonard calmly replies that he feels it necessary to get used to a real blade instead of a wooden one. Bradley observes the rookie roll up his sleeves and thinks he is acting with arrogance just because he managed to get a bit stronger during isolation. Suddenly, an immense shockwave explodes around them, throwing gigantic rocks through the air and leaving the instructor in complete shock at such strength. Facing all the dust and debris flying, Bradley lets out an exclamation of surprise upon witnessing the young man's demonstration of power. The senior knight is impressed and comments that it is unbelievable the fact that a pentacore reached the 3rd stage in just 1 month of training. Bradley admits that the young man's growth pace is indeed impressive, but begins to emanate an intimidating red aura around himself. The instructor advances with everything, delivering a powerful strike and shouts in a threatening way for the young apprentice not to rush or get too conceited. Leonard panics upon realizing he stands not the slightest chance to defend himself against that overwhelming attack with the strength level he currently possesses. However, Bradley stops his weapon very close to the blonde's face and says in a peaceful way for him not to be so frightened by that charge. The instructor delivers the real sword to Leonard and advises him not to do anything reckless. Receiving a polite thank you from the young man for the weapon, Bradley warns that if he loses the sword, he will have to pay with spiritual stones, making Leonard ask what would happen in case it ended up breaking in training. Bradley warns with a smile that Leonard will also have to pay for the new sword with spiritual stones, which makes the blonde find the method quite direct and simple. The instructor says goodbye, wishing that the young man gives his best in training and walks away toward the forest. Holding the map of the island with one hand, Leonard observes the real sword he just obtained and plans his next steps. Looking at the spot marked with a skull on the map, the MC decides it is a good idea to go there to check out the location from up close. His destination is the feared Forest of Remnants, a dark place packed with monsters that await in the shadows. This forest is inhabited by dangerous creatures, including hobgoblins that possess the classification of rank E2. While walking with his sword drawn, Leonard reflects that, no matter how clean the cuts are, it is impossible to hide the scent of blood from defeated enemies. The blonde quickly advances against the monsters and promises to give them a swift and painless end, slicing the adversaries with extreme ease. He explains that when these monsters pass away, the mana that was accumulated inside their body is expelled in the form of glowing spiritual stones. The youth gathers about 100 low-level spiritual stones in just one day. Considering the result good, but feeling that he still needs more, he realizes he will no longer be able to expect any kind of significant evolution if he continues training only in that forest of remnants. The location is known as a home for beasts that were discarded by the food chain, harboring only weak creatures of rank E. Suddenly, Leonard senses a totally different scent in the air and wonders if that would be the trail of a creature known as a gnoll. The MC closes his hand with force around his sword's hilt, preparing himself for the imminent danger that approaches. He realizes that, since the enemy doesn't even try to hide its presence, the creature certainly views him only as easy prey. With a provoking smile, Leonard comments that he seems to be heavily underestimated by the beast that stalks him in the darkness. With a sharp and focused gaze, the blonde challenges the monster, calling it an underdog, and invites it to initiate combat at once. The monster roars furiously upon revealing itself in the clearing, showing sharp teeth and eyes glowing with anger against the invader. The beast attacks with an overwhelming blow that destroys the ground and makes rocks fly everywhere, emitting a deafening cry. The blonde dodges the attack with ease and tells the hound to stop barking, maintaining his firm stance while holding his two swords. The monster roars once more with much anger, drooling with hatred while trying to locate the agile youth who escaped its charge. Leonard is impressed by the beast's raw strength, noting that it manages to change the direction of its attacks with a monstrous potency. Knowing of the danger of the opponent's strength, the blonde decides that the best strategy is simply to dodge each of the blows delivered. He notices that the enemy's power is different from the information he received, concluding that that is not the ordinary strength of just any gnoll. The system explains that an ordinary goblin is of rank E1, and when it evolves into a hobgoblin, its rank rises directly to level E2. In the same way, an ordinary gnoll normally belongs to rank D1, being naturally much stronger than the small green creatures. The MC thinks that, in the case of most monsters, the awakening and evolution process usually ends after just a single change. However, he realizes that that beast looks nothing like an opponent of rank D2, which means something unusual is happening there. It is an gnoll of rank D3, forcing the MC to accept that he will have no other choice but to fight with everything he has. He gives a determined smile and thinks that he will finally have a real training worthy of his effort after a long time. The beast lets out a grunt of surprise upon being hit by extremely fast and precise slashes that make dust and stones rise into the air. A powerful blast of blue energy cuts the setting with overwhelming speed, hitting the monster head-on in the middle of the smoke. Leonard moves with extreme agility through the sides, thinking that a wild and out-of-control attack like the beast's won't be able to touch him. He dodges in the air with pinpoint accuracy and confidently repeats that none of those disordered blows will manage to truly strike him. The young man approaches the opponent's giant body in a swift, dodging movement, seeking a perfect opening to deliver the final blow. He notices that the creature's skin is so tough that the impact of his initial attacks even lets slip bright sparks upon colliding with the body. The gnoll misses another brutal blow and ends up driving its heavy axe directly into the soil with a colossal force that leaves it stuck. Seeing the monster's weapon stuck, the blonde confirms that the adversary is all raw strength and decides to seize the great chance to attack if normal slashes fail. The monster lets out a cry of pain and astonishment upon being caught by surprise by the swift and lethal spinning movement of Leonard's sharp blade. The MC analyzes that the opponent's muscles and bone structure are incredibly resistant to common slashes and direct attacks. However, he aims straight at the monster's wide-open maw. Knowing very well that that sensitive inner part is impossible to be protected, Leonard delivers a precise and lethal blow right in the beast's throat, generating an explosion of golden light that seals the outcome of the combat. Calm finally returns to the silent forest when the monster's heavy body collapses lifelessly directly onto the leaf-covered soil. Looking at the opponent's corpse, Leonard lets out an exclamation of surprise upon noticing a spiritual stone of very intense purple glow emerge. He becomes happy to note that he obtained a medium-level spiritual stone, which alone equates to the value of 100 low-level stones. The young man concludes that if monsters of this caliber live around there, his internal energy can certainly grow at a much faster pace from here on out. He comprehends why the other apprentices avoid the location, but decides that he has also already finished what he had to do there and begins to withdraw. Back at the training cabin in the middle of the night, the wooden door begins to emanate a very intense blue glow coming from its interior. Sitting in a meditation position with his new sword by his side, Leonard concentrates his mana and makes currents of bluish wind circulate throughout his body. Looking at the energy that emanates from his hands, the MC is surprised to realize that he has already managed to reach the 10th stage of body tempering. Leonard reflects that it would be far too problematic if someone with a pentacore advanced so fast, and thinks of a way to obtain resources without drawing attention. The blonde goes on alert upon overhearing the voice of one of the veterans outside the cabin, whispering, worried if something bad had happened to him. The recruits comment that 3 whole months have already passed, and it seems the rookie hasn't left the cabin for absolutely anything during all this time. One of the young men from the group complains and questions if they really need to go there, check on the rookie's situation every single day that way. The group leader responds with seriousness that they need to be the first friendly veterans that the rookie will run into upon coming out of isolation. He explains that in a prestigious family like the Cardenas, connections are the strongest weapon, and a single alliance there is worth much more than bonds with smaller families. The veteran points to the cabin and adds that Leonard is number 1, and that even Supreme Commander Fabian is keeping an eye on his great talent. He pushes his colleague named Hayden to go greet the rookie, and the young man complains, telling him to stop pushing while holding a bucket full of fish. Hayden approaches the door and calls the rookie, asking if he is alive, commenting that if he doesn't eat properly, he won't manage to progress in his training. He begins to think the rookie passed away and suggests leaving due to not hearing any sound, but decides to take a quick peek through a crack in the door's wood. On the other side, Leonard notices their true intentions and finds it amusing for them to be far more friendly and helpful veterans than he ever expected to find. Thanks to that small crack in the door, the MC manages to look very closely and thoroughly analyze the face of the young Hayden, who was spying Leonard architectures, a plan thinking that his evolution would draw attention, but no one would suspect if the results belonged to a veteran isolated on the island for 10 years. Sitting on the cabin floor, he remembers an old technique from his past life and decides to try using it now. Even though it has been a long time since the last time the blonde activates the art of reverse utilization, a legendary disguise technique that allows the user to freely manipulate the veins and muscles of their face. He recalls that, after becoming the legendary Sword Emperor in his previous life, he never had the real need to hide his true identity from anyone again. As the young man channels his energy, the bones and muscles of his face begin to contort and change shape in an impressive manner. He finds it ironic that now he is using this highly complex disguise technique just to conceal his true power level from the other soldiers. Satisfied with the disguise's outcome, Leonard looks at his own hands and says to himself that now no one will be capable of noticing his true identity. The blonde perfectly assumes the young man's physical appearance and thinks that he will need to borrow Hayden's identity for a while to carry out his plans. 3 months pass, and the story advances to the swamp of the Mountain of Bones, an extremely humid, dangerous location enveloped in a dense green mist. Leonard walks through the swampy region and reflects on the absolute iron survival rule that he managed to learn during the time he spent there. He advances with agility through the deserted swamp, knowing that there is no one else around and that absolutely all creatures of that hostile place are dangerous. The young man knows that the beasts from there possess lethal venoms and stealthy camouflage abilities, making it necessary to move with the maximum caution possible. He leaps between the dry branches of the gigantic trees, aware that if he lowers his guard for a single second, he will end up making a fatal mistake. The MC knows that a slip-up would cause him to be eaten alive by the terrible lizardmen that lie in wait in the swamp's murky waters. Suddenly, a huge lizardman leaps roaring from the water, and Leonard reacts at that exact instant. Leaping from atop a tree with his sword in hand for combat, with a swift and fatal movement, the young man delivers an overwhelming vertical strike enveloped in blue energy that cuts the scaly creature from top to bottom. The blonde's precise attack splits the monster in half in midair, making a large amount of dark blood gush through the swamp's greenish waters. Leonard lands on the ground and suspects that the combat sound was a bit too loud, realizing next that the grand boss of that area just woke up. A giant and imposing creature emerges from the swamp's depths, wielding a stone spear and staring fixedly at the young hero who is on a rock. The gigantic lizardman roars in a threatening way, with its yellowish eyes glowing with anger upon seeing the trail of destruction left by the invader. Leonard analyzes the beast's fast charge and calmly comments that, despite the impressive speed, its movements are far too simple and predictable. He adds that he has no time to lose with whoever lacks formal swordsmanship training, slicing the giant boss into several pieces in the blink of an eye. After the battle, the blonde checks his full backpack and decides that, with 1,500 medium-level stones collected, it is time to change locations and advance stages. The narrative explains that the mana from those stones is enough to advance to the next level, but warns that breaking the barrier of a great realm is painful and intense. In the 10th stage of the physical realm, he uses Hayden's disguise to avoid suspicion, but knows that breaking the next great level right there on the island would be very dangerous. He looks thoughtfully at the dense forest around him and realizes it would be an almost impossible task to keep such a resounding level advancement a complete secret. Because of that, he concludes that he needs to urgently find a secure shelter against the weather to manage to contain the inevitable and violent mana explosion. While exploring a mountainous slope, the young man runs right into a glowing plantation, right in front of a dark cave guarded by an immense creature. He stands dazzled upon noticing that that field is packed with rare spiritual herbs, which offer a much higher mana absorption rate than that of the stones. Leonard observes the location's entrance and wonders if the giant and muscular troll that is on guard there would be the one responsible for managing and protecting that plantation. Suddenly, the troll's pointy ears contort, and it lets out a suspicious growl. Realizing there is something strange quickly approaching its territory, Leonard quickly hides behind some rocks to observe, and murmurs to himself that something very powerful is about to arrive at that location. The troll roars furiously and assumes an aggressive combat stance, concentrating a large amount of electricity and destructive energy around its body. In a totally unexpected way, a fierce and gigantic lycanthrope appears leaping from the trees with its sharp claws ready to attack the cave's guardian. The beast delivers a fast sequence of claws charged with blue electricity that strike the troll's defense head-on, generating an immense flash of light in the air. Watching everything from a prime seat in his hiding spot, Leonard begins to wonder if that brutal combat would be just a typical territorial dispute between monsters. He is impressed to see the earth shake with the lightning, and wonders if monsters of that level already possess the capability to freely manipulate the forces of nature. Upon seeing the troll levitate tons of gigantic rocks, Leonard admits that controlling so much earth and stone at will would be a difficult task, even for him currently. Leonard notices that the other beast is dodging all attacks using an incredible speed to leap from one side to the other. The combat between the monsters generates intense explosions of dust and blue light across the clearing, showing the brutality of each charge. The blonde analyzes the situation coldly, noting that those totally wild and directionless attacks are far too predictable for him. With total conviction, the young man thinks that blows without technique of that level would never be capable of touching him during real combat. He seizes an opening to counterattack, forcing a direct confrontation against the giant creature that tries to defend against the sword strike. Leonard is a bit surprised to note that the monster's skin is so resistant that it makes his blade let slip sparks upon colliding with it. The beast roars and delivers another violent blow with its heavy axe, trying in every way to subdue the young blonde through pure raw strength. The young man confirms it is just a beast of pure physical strength and decides to seize the moment when the axe gets stuck in the soil to attack. Leonard executes an agile movement with his sword, leaving the monster startled with the quickness of his reaction before the counterattack. He analyzes the adversary's body while attacking, recognizing that both the muscles and the bone structure of the creature are extremely tough. However, he soon identifies a vulnerable spot in the monster's neck region that possesses no natural protection against sharp blades. Without hesitating, the blonde delivers a precise and lethal sword strike directly into the enemy's throat, ending the combat at that exact moment. The monster's huge body collapses lifelessly on the forest floor, raising a light curtain of dust around the MC. Looking at the defeated creature, Leonard expresses surprise to see a shimmering spiritual stone emerge from the adversary's inanimate body. He celebrates upon finding that medium-level stone in the Forest of Remnants, knowing that it equates to 100 ordinary low-level stones. He reflects that the presence of creatures of that level in the forest is an excellent sign for his internal energy to manage to develop much faster. The young man comprehends the reason why the recruits avoid that area and decides that he has also already finished his business around there. Returning to the cabin, time passes, and the wooden door of his cabin returns to glow intensely with a bluish energy, marking the resumption of his meditation. Focused on his goal, the young blonde meditates patiently on the floor while channeling a massive amount of glowing mana around himself. Suddenly, the scene returns to the combat in the cave and shows the immense troll delivering a devastating punch toward the ground with all its strength. Leonard dodges the impact, leaping backward with agility, while the monster's punch makes the ground around crack and raise dust. The blonde notices that the adversary intentionally aimed at the cave's entrance to block it and leave him cornered instead of attacking him directly. Far from being intimidated, the young man gives a challenging smile and says that for him it's all fine. Accepting the monster's invitation to real combat, several gigantic rocks collapse from the ceiling and completely close the cave's entrance, leaving the internal environment totally isolated from the outside. The thud of the collapse echoes through the entire location while the dust settles, consolidating the hero's confinement together with the fearsome guardian. The The blonde advances quickly and deduces that the monster realized, in a few exchanges of blows, that it would never manage to beat him in terms of pure speed. The troll begins to throw stones in a totally out of control and violent way, making Leonard find that desperate attack attempt silly. He dodges the rocks, using them as support to leap in the air, knowing very well that receiving a single direct blow from those immense stones would be fatal. Leonard recognizes that the opponent is quite clever and decides that, in that case, he will need to change strategies to manage to finish the combat fast. He projects himself forward at high speed while an immense amount of electricity and dark energy begins to emanate from his body. The MC focuses his determination on the attack and decides that he will end that battle against the Guardian once and for all with a single lethal strike. The troll lets out a squeak of surprise upon being hit by an extremely fast blue energy slash that pierces its guard before it could react. The young man passes through the adversary like a blue flash, delivering a deep and precise slash on the muscular creature's back. In a spectacular way, Leonard notices that the opponent managed to survive only because it used the earth and stones as a shield to cushion the sharp blade's final impact. The troll turns furious with its fist enveloped in intense flames, ready to crush the young man, who just accepts the situation with tranquility and total focus. The Guardian delivers a devastating fire punch that strikes the ground with violence, generating a large explosion of flames that burns the cave floor. The monster's fire fist destroys the rocks around with extreme ease, spreading intense heat and ashes through the entire internal battlefield. Leonard quickly moves away from the flames and perfectly comprehends the reason why the lycanthropes were defeated so easily by that monster. He analyzes the Guardian's abilities and realizes that since the start of the combat, the opponent was in fact a rare user of two different elements. The troll roars with its eyes glowing in a threatening red tone amidst the fire, demonstrating all its fury against the human opponent. The young blonde recognizes that that is not a simple battle. He will manage to win easily just by trying to shorten the adversary's distance. He knows very well that if he touches that extreme heat of the troll's flames, he will end up melted in a matter of seconds by the overwhelming fire. With an extremely concentrated and serious look, he decides that he needs to precisely identify a single opening in the monster's defense to finish with a single blow. At the moment when the giant takes a false step and exposes its combat stance, the MC notices the perfect opportunity and decides to attack with everything. Giving a spectacular acrobatic leap, he uses the troll's own leg as support to catch momentum and go up toward the creature's chest with his sword. While advancing through the air with speed, the blonde feels a wonderful nostalgic sensation run through his body, remembering his old battles. The young man delivers the final blow with his sword, charged with blue energy directly into the giant monster's neck, calmly declaring that that is the end. An immense discharge of blue and white energy explodes around the troll, while it is thrown backward, lifeless amidst the remaining flames. Leonard lands on the soil in a light and graceful manner with his sword in hand, while the cave guardian's huge body collapses, defeated right behind him. He looks at the fallen enemy and reflects that the monster tried to react at the end, but it was already too late to manage to escape that lethal sword attack. Leonard's energy sword pierces with extreme violence the giant troll's chest, making a massive amount of blood gush from the fatal strike. The blonde lands on the ground and thinks to himself that he finally managed to pierce the adversary's chest, believing that the combat is over for good. However, the defeated troll's chest begins to glow intensely with a reddish tone, revealing a mana core about to explode. A catastrophic explosion of flames and smoke consumes the entire location, generating a deafening thud that shakes the structures of the closed cave. Leonard runs desperate to try and escape the fire, realizing that suffering the impact of such a strong explosion from close up would be extremely dangerous for him. The crash's immense shockwave throws the young man violently through the air, surpassing any physical defense attempt he could make. He collides with much force against the trunk of a giant tree that was at the back of the location, letting out an agonizing groan of pain with the brutal impact. The blonde spits blood and supports himself on the floor on his knees, asking himself with much pain if the violent impact against the tree broke all the bones in his body. Fallen under the golden tree's leaves, he notes that the fire is spreading fast and that the cave's interior will be completely destroyed in a few minutes. With injuries across his face, the hero reflects that, due to the cave's isolated location, he won't be able to count on any external help to rescue him from there. He realizes he needs to act alone to survive and throws on the floor all the spiritual stones he accumulated in his training backpack. Remembering that reaching a higher realm of power regenerates the injured body, he decides there is no time to hesitate and initiates the process immediately. With his trembling and bloody hand, the young man firmly grabs the spiritual stones from the floor to begin draining all their mana. With a shout of determination, Leonard initiates the forced cultivation while a gigantic spiral of bluish energy begins to envelop his entire body. He feels the pure mana coming from the spiritual stones quickly fill and heal his internal energy organs that had been damaged in the combat. The energy flow is so immense that it heals his heart in an accelerated way, utilizing the strength of more than 1,500 stones simultaneously. Even with all that accelerated recovery occurring in his body, the youth clearly notices that that quantity of mana still won't be enough. He drags himself with difficulty across the soil and concludes that he will need to consume every single one of the cultivated spiritual herbs that grow around the golden tree. Without hesitating, Leonard rips a handful of glowing herbs from the ground and consumes them quickly to maximize the energy in his organism to the utmost. The blonde enters deep meditation at the center of a gigantic mana whirlwind, feeling that the accumulation of power surpassed his body's normal limits. Suddenly, the 5 elemental cores of the pentacore begin to spin at the same time in perfect synchrony, generating a unified energy flow. All the dispersed mana begins to quickly condense into a single glowing point, making the young man feel all his strengths unite as one. The whirlwind of wind and bluish mana stabilizes around the blonde, bringing the indescribable sensation of having gained a new and powerful spiritual heart. The narrative confirms that his entire body and his mana were restored completely, allowing him to finally break the barrier and reach a new realm. However, the energy flow surprisingly continues increasing without stopping, far surpassing the power limits that a normal human body would endure. Amidst that power storm, the silhouette of a colossal dragon of bluish energy begins to majestically materialize above the MC. With the success of the advancement, the golden tree glows and its leaves float through the air, while Leonard realizes all the mana from his pentacore was integrated. He stands astonished upon realizing his power level took an absurd leap, advancing straight to the 3rd stage of the coveted external strength realm. He remembers that most veterans spent whole years stagnant just in the 2nd stage, which highlights even more the speed of his advancement. He notes that his wounds vanish totally and that the mana flow is much faster, thinking that this feat will cause a massive stir in the Cardenas family. Looking at his own fist, the young man reflects on how crossing a single great cultivation barrier could bring him such a gigantic strength evolution. The youth wonders how he could survive that immense explosion without feeling any of the extreme heat that should be impossible to absorb in that closed place. Leonard focuses his gaze on the golden tree's ramifications and finally comprehends the mystery upon spotting a glowing blue fruit hanging from one of the branches. The young man extends his hand toward the branch and observes that the intense light diminished almost completely, leaving only that single luminous fruit in front of him. He deduces that the fruit's abundant spiritual energy worked as a powerful shield, protecting him in the cave against the impact of the explosion's flames. Holding the blue fruit with care, the blonde feels an instant connection and thinks that that mystical object seems to fit perfectly in his hand. He observes the dust particles floating around and wonders if the mystical fruit actually sucked even the last drop of residual mana from that area. The blonde puts the backpack on his back and promises he will plant the seed again in another location. Mentally thanking the fruit for saving his life, Leonard begins to run back in a hurry, knowing that if he delays more than that, he will end up raising many unnecessary suspicions among the soldiers. With a single powerful blow, the young man explodes the gigantic stones that blocked the cave's entrance, opening a way back to the external forest. He smiles half awkward seeing the destruction and thinks he ended up overdoing it on the strength for having become too strong, rooting for that not to turn into a scandal. From atop a hill in the forest, the MC spots his training cabin in the distance and prepares to conclude the return route before dawn. Already disguised as Hayden and carrying a bluish wolf pelt on his back, the young man celebrates relieved for managing to return to the camp right in time. He resolves to organize his things in the cabin before the veterans see him, knowing it would be problematic to explain his state after 3 months of daily training with them. Outside the cabin, one of the veterans overhears the characteristic sound of the wooden door slowly opening and turns curious to see what it is. He draws his companion's attention with enthusiasm, pointing to the cabin and commenting surprised that the rookie's door finally opened. After all this time, Ian runs excited in the blonde's direction and introduces himself formally as a friendly veteran, putting his hand on his chest and giving a welcome with a big smile. Maintaining his flawless and polite stance of always, the young blonde makes a brief, respectful bow and introduces himself to the veterans simply as Leonard. He invents an excuse saying his swordsmanship hit a limit recently and respectfully asks the veteran if he would accept to do a combat training. Ian finds the request sudden and asks if the rookie is sure, receiving a polite response from Leonard saying it would be a great honor to have the chance to learn. Ian says there is no way to refuse a request made in such a polite manner. While one of his team colleagues calls him from a distance, the veteran asks Leonard to follow him and guarantees he will show the rookie what it truly means to be a real knight of the prestigious Cardenas family. Ian happily thinks he managed to obtain the advantage in combat, but soon lets out a murmur of astonishment upon realizing that something totally unexpected happened. The veteran wonders surprised why he is floating, while the narrative confirms that the training combat ended quickly with Ian's humiliating defeat right after. The other team colleague named Gale falls flat on his back on the ground and declares his surrender, having also been easily defeated by the young blonde. The following combats show the MC moving in a spectacular way in the form of a fast blur, dodging without the slightest effort the veteran's charges. The opponent gets irritated and wonders indignant if that is really the skill level of a recruit who just came out of the basic training camp. With an acrobatic and agile leap, Leonard delivers a precise blow that disarms and defeats the veteran once and for all amidst a strong impact. At this, the opponent concentrates his mana and makes the hilt of his wooden sword begin to emanate an intense heat enveloped in reddish fire flames. Upon seeing the scene, Ian yells furious at his companion disguised as Hayden, questioning in an aggressive way the reason he is using mana in a friendly training. The veterans run worried in the rookie's direction to ask if he is fine, and Leonard calmly replies yes, while his hand still lets slip sparks. The blonde apologizes to the veterans for the situation, and calmly explains that he ended up using an instinctive self-defense technique to protect himself from the fire. He observes his own slightly injured hand and notices with surprise that even blocking a sword with the use of concentrated mana can end up causing damage. The young blonde gives a discreet smile of satisfaction upon concluding internally that pure and simple swordsmanship definitely is not all that matters in that world. One of the young men asks why the rookie is not mad, while Leonard reflects that he intended only to help them as gratitude, but sees he has much to learn there. Holding the hilt of his wooden sword firmly, the blonde says to the veterans with much sincerity that he is anxious to continue the next trainings with them. With a friendly smile on his face, Leonard points his training sword forward and states that training with all of them certainly will be a quite fun activity. Ian accepts Leonard's request to train daily and thinks to himself that he cannot let that excellent opportunity to create bonds with the genius slip away. Later, Ian appears at the MC's cabin carrying a large backpack and warns with an apologetic tone that that night's training session will have to be canceled. Leonard opens the door and asks if something happened. Noticing the absence of the other two veterans and noticing that their armor and equipment look very different from the usual, Ian asks if he didn't hear about the great explosion in the swamp that caused a massive stir, leaving Leonard relieved to see he is not the main suspect of what occurred. The veteran explains that apparently a lycanthrope and a troll that reached real demon level had a bloody territorial dispute on the Mountain of Bones. Ian adds, saying that the troll was totally carbonized in the battle, while the lycanthrope was found without life and with its skin completely torn from its body. He says it must have been a terrible life-or-death combat, and that weaker monsters are invading the location to take advantage of the chaos left by the boss's passing. He explains that the knights are going out to clear the mess in the night training, and advises the rookie to stay in the cabin resting due to lacking the level for real combat. Before leaving the location, the veteran remembers something important, and tells Leonard that he brought a very useful and special gift to help him in his day-to-day. Ian throws 5 swords on the grass floor and says that, knowing he must have broken several blades in training, he brought these simple options for the rookie to use at will. Leonard thanks from his heart for the veteran's kindness, and Ian gives a thumbs-up sign, jokingly asking for the genius not to forget him in the future. The blonde promises he won't forget, and the veteran says goodbye, advising him not to leave the cabin today, warning that there are things in the world that swordsmanship alone does not solve. Leonard mentally thanks for his friend's advice, and realizes that, as the stir mobilized the entire order, any reckless movement of his now would be problematic. Despite all the danger, the young man realizes that that chaotic situation on the island is in fact the golden opportunity he needed to move without drawing attention. The hero runs through the forest with his dark cloak, thinking he can act with more boldness, but recognizes that the risk of using his disguise technique today is too high. He knows the location of the veterans, and concludes that if he encounters someone using Hayden's face now, he would end up creating a massive and dangerous confusion in the camp. Even finding the idea unpleasant, the young blonde decides that the best path to keep himself concealed is covering his head, using the dark wolf pelt from the lycanthrope. He advances, leaping swiftly across the mountainous rocks under the reddish sky, convinced that that is a unique chance in his life to explore the island freely, with a focused and concentrated look on his goal.
The MC runs toward the opposite side of the main training field to brave new areas. The hero finally reaches the top of an immense cliff and prepares to explore the dangerous plain of owls, which extends under a dark sky in front of him. upon stepping onto the plain's rocky soil.
The blonde notices a deathly silence and suspects there are mysterious enemies observing his movements in the middle of the dense mist. He manages to clearly feel several gazes loaded with pure bloodlust turned to him in the darkness, but finds it strange the fact that the beasts don't come attack him soon. Without knowing if the beasts are afraid or just far too cautious, the hero continues walking and concludes that staying just waiting for the attack would be a great waste of time. Suddenly, a huge winged monster descends at high speed, cutting the skies and advancing toward the hero with a powerful roar that echoes through the entire plain. It is an immense giant owl with sharp claws that hovers majestically in the air before the MC, flapping its heavy wings against the strong wind. With a calm and focused look, the young man pulls his hood back and mentally asks the owlbear beast if it will be his first worthy opponent at that location. With an excited smile on his lips, the young hero thinks that facing a strong monster of that level will indeed be the perfect opportunity to test his new power. Meanwhile, the scene changes to the seacoast at dusk, where the narrative reveals that a mysterious group of warriors has just landed on the beaches of the island of Calabagos. The leader of the mysterious squad makes a quick count and informs his men that the group is short-handed. With the absence of exactly 2 members of the band, he explains that the 2 fell into the sea for failing to catch the air current and asks for everyone to witness their sacrifice for the beloved homeland of the Kingdom of Kyrgyz. The commander, known as the 5th Shadow of Kyrgyz, questions with much anger if the skies are incapable of comprehending the painful situation and the struggle of his people. He orders that the passings be not in vain and demands that they complete the mission at any cost, receiving enthusiastic war cries from the Shadow Knights of Kyrgyz. The warrior shouts for them to capture the Cardenas family apprentice alive, stating that they need to reveal the entire hidden secret behind that lineage's cursed blood. The commander orders them to show no mercy, even if the target is just a child, aggressively declaring that they are the root of all evil. The wind blows hard across the dry, barren sands of the plain, creating a tense atmosphere in the silent desert just before the battle begins. One of Kyrgyz's warriors charges forward in a rush, complaining that he ended up getting separated from the rest of his group before he even realized it. He is startled by the sheer number of rank A monsters on the island, thinking he won't be able to fight without the presence and support of his captain on site. The man grits his teeth in anger as sweat pours down his face, wondering what on earth those Cardenas family fiends are up to there. He notices that no threatening monsters have appeared on the plain and deduces with relief that, fortunately, the creatures get weaker the further you go into the island. Analyzing the map, he suspects that another highly skilled person must have cleared out the monsters in the area, but decides not to worry too much about it. He spots the silhouette of a giant owlbear and thinks with confidence that, although the creature looks quite strong, he can take it down easily. He draws his sword and charges toward the winged monster, preparing a swift surprise attack to end the fight quickly. However, the invader stops his strike mid-air in utter shock when he notices up close that the giant owlbear was already completely lifeless on the ground. Standing over the monster's still body, he looks around thoughtfully and begins to wonder if someone else really was just there. The man is amazed to spot several other fallen beasts with their monster stones exposed, realizing that an absurdly skilled warrior is operating in that area. Suddenly, a surprise attack from above strikes his blade with extreme force, making the warrior spin around quickly, shouting to know who is there. Leonard lands gracefully in front of him and sarcastically replies that asking who is there should be his line and his line alone. The Kyrgyz invader is completely shocked to realize that a blonde kid managed to surprise him and corner him with such incredible speed. The man coughs and chokes, unable to speak, while the hooded blonde youth glares at him coldly and demands to know his true identity. Realizing his opponent is choking and unable to answer, Leonard calmly says he will find out the truth on his own and focuses mana into his hand. Desperate and terrified at losing his ability to make a sound, the warrior internally curses the situation while trying to recover. The enemy tries to strike back with a sequence of rapid sword attacks, but the blonde youth dodges every single advance with extreme lightness. Leonard senses the hostility in his opponent's blade and seriously concludes that the invader has absolutely no intention of sparing his life. The two begin to trade swift sword strikes, and their blades collide violently in midair, scattering a massive amount of bright sparks. The Kyrgyz warrior widens his eyes behind his mask, shocked to see that all his deadly advances were easily blocked by a mere boy. After the intense exchange of blows, both opponents quickly leap backward to gain distance and reevaluate each other's combat stance. The clash resumes and the swords collide with even greater force, generating a powerful shockwave filled with purple magical energy all around them. Leonard realizes his strike didn't go deep and suspects the attack was blocked, while the warrior also wonders if the blonde youth is using a magical artifact. The blonde youth delivers a swift, arching slash that glows a brilliant yellow, forcing his opponent to quickly retreat to escape that lethal blow. The man senses the danger and summons the spirit of a giant golden snake around his sword. Annoyed at having to use his ultimate technique against a youth, Leonard analyzes the technique and concludes that his opponent hid a tricky trap in his sword, comparing the strike to a sneak attack from a venomous serpent. He dodges easily, saying the style is basic and predictable, perfectly anticipating the entire trajectory of his opponent's golden sword. Blocking the blade right in front of his rival's face, Leonard coldly mocks him, asking if he only ever faces and defeats weak opponents. Suddenly, several magical chains wrapped in purple smoke emerge from the enemy's artifact and begin to bind themselves tightly around the hero's body. The warrior gives a wicked smile beneath his mask and expresses fake pity for the blonde youth, who ended up leaving his own sword behind in the fight. The enemy is left in absolute shock upon realizing that the young man actually discarded his weapon entirely on purpose to deliver a powerful punch. The blonde youth advances and mocks his opponents, childish thinking, questioning if he really thought a warrior would be defenseless just because his sword was sealed. He delivers a devastating punch that shatters the purple energy chains and sends the warrior flying back, leaving him completely incredulous at such strength. With his face bruised and bleeding, the man marvels at the audacity of a youth his age and wonders in terror if he has already awakened the power of the family's tainted blood. Leonard ties the enemy to a tree and calmly states that his life is now in his hands, warning that his opponent's body and mana are completely useless. Tied with heavy ropes against the trunk, the Kyrgyz warrior grits his teeth in pure hatred and calls the blonde youth a coward for using such a method. He screams in a rage, calling Leonard a filthy Cardenas demon, accusing him of mocking his pride with a despicable power and vowing never to forgive him. The prota just stares at him with a confused and curious look from beneath his hood, not fully understanding all that fury and resentment from the enemy. He points to the items on the ground and counters, saying his opponent used a magical artifact in an underhanded way, calling the tied-up warrior a foolish fool. The prisoner tells him to shut up and yells that dirty tricks are completely fair against the Cardenas family, promising to expose whatever hidden strength the blonde youth is using. Leonard simply clenches his fist firmly right in front of the prisoner's face, causing the terrified warrior to widen his eyes in immediate panic. Unable to take the pressure and the fear of what might happen next, the Kyrgyz man begins to scream in desperation, telling the blonde youth to just finish him off already. With an extremely cold gaze, Leonard replies that the decision of life or choice belongs to him alone, and that the prisoner doesn't even have the right to beg for an end. The tied-up man screams that he would rather pass away than give up any useful information, once again calling the hero a fraud who inherited a completely tainted family bloodline. Hearing his enemy's words of hatred, Leonard reflects thoughtfully on what that tainted blood could be, and if the prisoner is actually referring to his lineage. The warrior states with great conviction that the blonde youth will never be able to deny or hide all the dark sins flowing directly through his veins. He yells that everyone in the Cardenas clan is not truly human, and that the birth of someone with such monstrous strength is treated practically as an anomaly. Leonard gives an enigmatic smile beneath his hood and comments, quite calmly, that the prisoner really seems to know a lot about his family. Leonard orders the prisoner to answer at once, questioning why the family branches would be hidden outside the country if there were no secrets in his lineage. The man yells in anger, saying that if there truly were a legitimate heir in the clan, they would have absolutely no reason to hide like that. Leonard questions if his family's prosperity causes so much envy that it makes them abandon their honor to kidnap a child and use cowardly magical chains. He walks calmly and states that nothing will change for those third-rate invaders who possess no real power or honor. Leonard approaches the prisoner with a threatening look and asks if, with that pathetic appearance, he has the courage to face his own ancestors. The tied-up man explodes in a fury and yells for the youth not to be so arrogant, asking if he is really trying to insult him like that. Leonard quietly comments that the invader came from Kyrgyz, leaving the prisoner in absolute shock upon realizing the kid already knew his origin. Suddenly, the blonde youth makes an extremely fast movement with his hand, cutting through the air right before the startled prisoner. Leonard says coldly that people tend to forget even the obvious when they lose their cool, while the prisoner only groans in pain and dread. He points his finger and warns that the prisoner will soon collapse for unleashing his mana circuits, but guarantees he will make him confess everything before that Kyrgyz used to be a medium-sized kingdom known as the Holy Land of Knights on the western side of the continent until a few centuries ago. However, everything changed with the arrival of the Red Dragon Knights of Cardenas, who dealt a crushing defeat to the defenders of Kyrgyz. That single and terrible defeat caused Cruises to be totally forgotten by the world. While Cardenas claimed the title of the Holy Land, Leonard wonders if they decided to attack the Cardenas family just to try to regain the fame they lost in the past. He realizes that their intention to investigate the secrets of his family bloodline ends up aligning perfectly with his own doubts and interests. To him, the biggest problem of all at the moment is the fact that extremely strong warriors from the Transcendent Realm have already landed on that island. Analyzing the entire dangerous situation, the blonde youth quickly concludes that he needs to immediately inform Tutor Bradley about what happened. Leonard stays focused and knows very well that the real enemy to be faced is the dangerous Shadow Knights from the Kingdom of Cruises. He worries because most of the warriors on the island are just apprentices, making that threat far too heavy and dangerous for them. Looking at the power of his magical sword, Leonard admits to himself that his current skills are still only at the level of a mere imitation. Even while aware of his limitations at the moment, the Prota firmly believes that this power should be enough to handle the situation without losing any time. The youth decides to take for himself all the magical tools and artifacts that belonged to the invader he just defeated. He places the unconscious man over his shoulders and sarcastically comments that the prisoner certainly has no right to complain about anything. The scene changes to the training camp surrounded by trees and campfires during the night, showing a series of organized white tents. A few apprentices walk by exhausted, sighing in relief to finally have some free time after the grueling training they had earlier. While one of them hopes that nothing bad happens, another calls out to veteran Ian upon spotting something strange and mysterious just ahead. The young warriors freeze in astonishment as they notice what appears to be a lifeless body fallen on the campground with a glowing blue flame. Faced with that terrible discovery, one of the guys immediately runs to get Tutor Bradley's help and report what they found in the area. As soon as he arrives at the scene of the incident, the experienced Bradley analyzes the mark left on the body with great attention and is quite surprised by what he sees. He identifies the attack as an aura blade, an extremely powerful technique that can only be used by those who have reached the master level. Bradley spots a note dropped on the ground near the body and seriously comments that the information written on the paper seems to be entirely true. The paper carries a detailed confession, supposedly written by the invader who regretted underhandedly attacking the young apprentices on the island. The letter warns that the terrible Shadow Knights of Cruises, led by a master from the Transcendent Realm, are advancing toward the camp. Bradley grits his teeth in worry, knowing that gathering the apprentices' forces could help, but the real and biggest problem would be facing their leader. Without wasting any more time, he orders veteran Ian to immediately sound the emergency alarm across the entire island to alert all the warriors. The loud sound of the emergency signal echoes with full force through the camp buildings and fields, breaking the silence of that night in an alarming way. Upon hearing the danger signal, dozens of young armed knights begin to run in a rush and quickly organize themselves outside the facilities. Leonard walks calmly through the noisy crowd and notices that Tutor Bradley indeed decided to summon all the warriors in the area. Leonard smiles internally to see that the tutor got his message, while Bradley shouts to the assembled crowd that this is not a drill. Bradley reveals in a serious tone before the lined-up soldiers that Calabagos Island has been invaded by enemy forces possessing formidable military power. He explains that the invaders have 30 elite warriors and an extremely powerful leader who has already reached the transcendent level of a swordmaster. Bradley asks the youths if they have any concept of the absurd strength of a transcendent master, telling them to imagine someone at Commander Fabian's level. He emphasizes that this type of legendary warrior is like a walking catastrophe, against whom a simple numerical advantage of soldiers means absolutely nothing. Bradley gives two difficult options to the guys, asking if they prefer to activate the space portal to flee the island and wait for family reinforcements. The tutor finishes his speech by challenging the young apprentices to decide whether they will run away like cowards or stay there to fight bravely. Leonard reflects in silence that a real battle would be an excellent learning opportunity for them, provided they actually managed to survive the fight. He concludes that no one in the camp could be blamed or judged if they decided to choose to retreat before a danger as deadly as that one. To the Prota's surprise, one of the young apprentices raises his fist firmly and shouts with determination that he chooses to stay and fight the enemies. Inspired by his courage, other warriors also draw their weapons and say they trained far too hard to fall easily without first showing their worth. Leonard smiles at his companion's fearless attitude and admits that fighting in the face of danger takes a lot of guts, gaining a new respect for them. The young warriors raise their swords at the same time, shouting in unison that they are ready to fight the terrible invasion. The entire troop of apprentices positions themselves in a massive and organized battle formation right before Tutor Bradley praises everyone's courage and says he respects their choice, but warns that they will request reinforcements from Commander Fabian immediately. As day begins to break over the mountains of Calabogos, the tutor firmly orders everyone to prepare for the worst. Leonard observes a hidden cave and reflects thoughtfully that he never imagined he would need to use that hole in the ground so soon. He was evacuated because he was considered a protected target, which was great for him to be able to quietly examine the magical tools he acquired. The blonde youth places a magical ring on his finger that glows intensely with a beautiful and mysterious light green gem. Suddenly, the ring begins to emanate an unstable energy that makes Leonard grit his teeth as he tries to control the generated force. To the young man's surprise, the artifact's green gem cannot withstand the pressure of his power and ends up completely shattering on his fingers. He realizes that his own heart blocked the incoming mana from the outside. Concluding that none of those ordinary magical tools will work for him, Leonard notices that the enemy knight's signaling device is the only thing he can still use, since he learned how it works from the prisoner. The Prota plans to make a surprise attack if he finds the enemies, or use the necklace as a distraction if he ends up being discovered by them. He begins to run at high speed through the forest, reminding himself that the only truly dangerous opponent is the Swordmaster. Moving fast across the plains, the blonde youth vows to himself that he won't allow the invaders to act as they please on the island. Suddenly, the necklace picks up an enemy request for reinforcements, making Leonard assume that the opponent in that area must not be from the transcendent realm. He gives a small smile upon realizing that the adversaries who sent the signal probably still don't know that he is actually an enemy. Determined, the Prota decides to surprise and defeat all the invaders at once, while they are still confused by his arrival. Meanwhile, the scene shifts directly to the dangerous mountainous region known as Lion's Ravine. A massive torrent of purple energy explodes violently in the area, shattering rocks and scattering boulders in all directions. One of the invaders spits blood and curses furiously at the despicable Cardenas family because of that devastating attack they suffered. Panic takes over the enemies as they come face to face with the Manticore, a terrifying and gigantic rank A monster that inhabits that region of the island. The commander tells everyone to prioritize the mission and flee from the beast, but one of them warns that their companion is running toward the monster. One of the warriors suggests they can defeat the lone creature if they get quick support, but he is interrupted by a shout of alert. Leonard appears by surprise and coldly asks if the companion they were referring to was the one he had just taken care of. Wielding two swords charged with blue lightning, Leonard advances relentlessly and eliminates 3 adversaries in the blink of an eye. The survivor widens his eyes behind his ninja mask, totally incredulous to see that this youth knew how to use their signaler. The blonde youth calmly says he just provoked the prisoner a bit to get him to talk, mocking that their organization's strength is pathetic. Blinded by hatred upon seeing his allies defeated on the ground, the last invader charges at Leonard, screaming that he is a despicable boy. Leonard dodges easily and comments with total coldness that the enemy made the grave mistake of letting himself be blinded by his own emotions in battle. The man still tries to shout that this is revenge for his companions, but he is struck down by Leonard and falls with a groan of pain. Observing the bodies of the enemies fallen on the muddy ground, the Prota just murmur coldly that all of them were complete idiots. He asks the dying man if they somehow forgot what they were truly fighting in the middle of all that chaos, pointing toward the Manticore. With its red eyes glowing intensely in fury, the colossal rank A beast roars loudly and focuses all its attention on Leonard. Leonard faces the legendary creature without any fear, which has the body of a lion, the tail of a snake, and the mixed features of goblins and trolls. While advancing wielding his swords, the blonde youth wonders about the monster's heads, but is surprised when the creature asks who he is. The mystical monster slowly approaches, revealing a bizarre humanoid face hidden amidst its dense and dark lion's mane. Leonard is momentarily intrigued to realize he is facing a wild monster, capable of speaking the human tongue fluently. The beast surprises him by saying it will perish if it fights the boy, making Leonard admire the monster's ability to gauge the strength of its opponents. The monster warns that it won't go down easily, and that, if it buys enough time, he will come to its rescue, leaving Leonard curious about who he might be. Looking at the mangled bodies of the experienced Shadow Knights, it becomes evident that the ally mentioned by the monster is absurdly strong. The blonde youth deduces that it refers to the leader of the invaders, known as the Fifth Shadow, a single man who is considered more dangerous than all the rest. Leonard knows very well that, because he is a true sword master, he wouldn't stand the slightest chance of beating that opponent at his current level. Although he knows it's dangerous to linger there, he mocks and asks the Manticore if it really thinks he'll just take a monster's word for it. With a defiant look, the gigantic Manticore replies that if the boy doesn't fear the end, then he should make the first move into battle. Leonard sheathes one of his swords and praises the creature's courage, deciding to spare its life this time, but warning that there won't be a next. The beast leaps backward and curses the youth as a foolish human, before trying to launch an extremely fast surprise strike in his direction. Leonard isn't even unfazed by the underhanded advance, and just comments quite calmly that he already expected that reaction from the monster. He dodges the manticore's attack with extreme agility and begins to focus powerful blue electrical energy along his arms. The young blonde leaps over the beast and delivers a devastating diagonal slash, firmly stating that his first strike always aims for the head. The attack strikes the manticore's face dead on, and it lets out a final cry of incredulity as it realizes the boy already knew its weak point. The manticore screams in pain while its tails whip the air violently, but the young blonde remains floating in the air surrounded by sparks. The hero executes a swift cross-shaped movement and declares with extreme coldness that his second strike is focused directly on the beast's lungs. Leonard finishes the attack by piercing the monster's heart and says that, just as it had warned, he doesn't have much time to waste there right after the beast falls. The invader's signaling necklace begins to emit an intermittent glow and a high-pitched sound right against his chest. Leonard senses the imminent danger and throws the magical necklace to the ground before quickly leaping far away to escape the newcomer. The fifth shadow picks up the necklace from the ground and regrets arriving too late, saying that if he had come sooner, they could have achieved glory together. Suddenly, the terrible swordmaster senses a nearby presence, unleashes a massive blast of green energy, and shouts, asking who is hiding. Leonard hides behind a large rock, surprised by the fact that his opponent sensed his presence from so far away, knowing he needs to fall back. The kid uses his ability to open holes in the ground to slide through the terrain, focused solely on creating the greatest distance possible from that monster. The powerful enemy leader observes the crater and murmurs to himself that perhaps it was just his imagination, something that rarely ever happens to him. He reflects suspiciously that his intuition might be failing because the invasion plans are going far worse than expected. He walks back and promises before the swords driven into the ground that the losses of his companions fallen in battle will not be in vain. The man advances with a dark look, comforting himself with the idea that the main objective of their invasion on the island has already been successfully achieved. In another part of the island, the blonde youth lands softly on the ground covered in dry leaves as he exits the underground passage he dug. Suddenly, Leonard finds a severely wounded Cardenas knight on the ground, realizing at that exact moment that it's already too late to save his life. The injured warrior opens his eyes with difficulty and asks in a weak voice if the youth before him is just one of the apprentices on the island. The dying man shares that 45 intermediate knights were eliminated in a single instant by a single and terrifying swordmaster. He continues to report with much effort that the 8 young apprentices who were missing and being searched for were all captured. Leonard listens intently about the prisoners who were tied up and taken by force by the dangerous invaders under orders from their leader. The wounded warrior takes his last breath while Leonard seriously reflects that the hostages must already be far away from that area. The blonde youth tries to decipher the invaders' logistics, wondering how they managed to go unnoticed while carrying so many hostages at the same time. He concludes that the enemy's plan is to use the youths as test subjects, which means they need to transport them alive and without too many injuries. The proto reasons quickly and deduces that, to transport so many people safely and quickly, there is only one single possible method. He remembers mass teleportation, a magical circle capable of transporting dozens of people to a distant location. Simultaneously, Leonard knows he needs to race against time, since the invaders have already managed to get what they wanted by capturing the apprentices. He deduces that, to perform a teleportation of so many people, they will need a wide area, which makes their final destination very easy to predict. Leonard wonders if Tutor Bradley is already hunting the group and imagines that his mentor must be searching every corner of that forest. With a compassionate look, the youth gently touches the dying warrior and tells him to rest in peace from now on. With Leonard's final touch of soothing energy, the brave knight's suffering finally ceases completely in that clearing. Leonard begins to walk resolutely toward his goal, murmuring that Tutor Bradley is looking for the invaders in the completely wrong place. He wants to warn his mentor, but knows that the advice of a simple new recruit wouldn't carry enough weight to change the Order's strategy. With no other viable alternative, Leonard decides that the only option is to guide Tutor Bradley himself directly to the enemy's hideout. Meanwhile, the determined Tutor Bradley leads his troop of young knights through the dense shadows of the island's trees. Noticing the silence of the woods, the tutor grows irritated and curses the cowardly enemies who fled, throwing their own honor in the trash. Suddenly, a figure passes quickly through the bushes, and Bradley turns immediately, shouting furiously to know who is there. The mentor makes an agile leap with his sword drawn, blocking the path of a masked invader trying to escape while carrying a hostage. Bradley grits his teeth as he analyzes the hooded figure's dodging stance, wondering if that agile movement style came from Cruzy's. He shouts for his apprentices to snap out of it, energetically ordering everyone to attack and eliminate the invader immediately. The hooded figure makes a spectacular leap over the treetops, thinking with satisfaction that the attraction plan is working perfectly. Several apprentices thrust their blades at him, shouting that he won't escape, but the invader dodges all the strikes with ease. He runs incredibly nimbly through the trees, using the enemy's own charge as momentum to advance along the right route. Bradley reappears attacking from above with his flaming sword and sarcastically praises the impressive speed of the supposed Cruzus warrior behind his ninja mask. The guy smiles discreetly upon realizing that his bait plan has been a complete success. Up to that moment, Bradley brings down his blade of fire in a rage, yelling at the audacity of that opponent who keeps mocking their attempts at capture. Upon arriving at the beach, the tutor is shocked to see bodies on the ground and realizes that the hooded figure guided him straight to the coast without him noticing hidden at a distance. The blonde youth observes everything and knows that the real and most powerful opposing leader will make his appearance very soon. The fifth shadow emerges from the shadows of the beach and mocks Bradley, calling him a Cardenas dog and telling him not to be in such a rush to pass away right there. Bradley asks if he is the brains behind that invasion, and the Swordmaster counters by saying that this is just the first step of his great achievement. Bradley belittles the cowardly act of kidnapping children and orders him to surrender, but the master just activates his green sword, telling him to have patience. With an extremely confident smile on his face, the leader of the invaders arrogantly asks if the tutor really thought they came without a plan. The fifth shadow points upward, laughing arrogantly, and coldly states to Bradley that he and his knights have already been defeated. Realizing that it is a mass teleportation circle, Bradley panics and shouts that he won't let the invaders escape. The Swordmaster reveals that only 15 minutes remain for the teleportation, and promises to personally hold off Bradley until time runs out. The villain delivers a sequence of rapid attacks wrapped in a strong green aura, telling the tutor to fight all he wants for his life. Bradley breaks into a cold sweat and grits his teeth, feeling firsthand the massive difference in power between himself and a legitimate swordmaster. While the forest shakes from the impacts, Leonard observes everything from high up on a branch and mentally asks for Tutor Bradley to hold on just a bit longer. With a focused gaze, the Prota vows to himself that he will take advantage of the distraction on the beach to rescue all the captured knights. The youth advances toward the invaders' main camp, which is illuminated by the massive magical teleportation circle glowing in the sky. Disguised in Cruzus attire, the blonde youth walks calmly and enters the main tent right before the eyes of the oblivious enemy guards. The blonde youth notices that their guard is completely down due to the confrontation on the beach. Knowing that this is the perfect opportunity to act upon entering the tent, Leonard comes across several fellow apprentices tied to one of another who are surprised to see an invader approaching. The magical shackles binding the recruits' arms emanate a strong and sinister purple energy, completely sealing away their mana. One of the recruits widens his eyes in shock as he sees that his heavy magical shackles simply snapped and fell to the ground. Confused, the freed youth asks why a masked enemy would be helping to free them from their chains in the middle of that invasion. Leonard draws an electrical sword and coldly says he has no time or obligation to give explanations, telling everyone to flee from there immediately. He observes the recruits getting up in a rush and notices the feeling of gratitude starting to show in the eyes of each of those young knights. The freed guys deeply thank the hooded hero before starting to quietly escape toward the tent exit. Seeing the group escape safely, Leonard comments with satisfaction that the hostage issue has finally been resolved with absolute success. Behind his ninja mask, the youth gives a slight smirk upon realizing that he is now completely free to act. Without having to hold back, Leonard walks with calm steps toward the exit and mentally prepares to deal with the remaining enemies guarding the area, moving like a true blue flash. He charges at the guards and delivers a precise attack that splatters blood across the walls. The blonde youth continues his relentless charge and comments quite coldly that it's time to clean up all that trash from the camp. While the Cruzus guards let out agonizing cries of pain as they are defeated, Leonard observes them with total indifference and coldness. The scene cuts back to the beach, where Bradley's sword is sent flying away after he receives a devastating attack wrapped in green smoke. The Swordmaster mocks, saying the fight served as a decent pastime, while Bradley curses on his knees and tries to stop his wound from bleeding. The villain declares that this useless game has come to an end and that soon the kingdom of Cruzus will return to the top of the sword world. Suddenly, the Swordmaster widens his eyes as he senses a powerful presence and realizes that the one who has been disrupting his plans has finally arrived. Leonard appears falling from the sky at high speed, wielding his blade against the enemy leader waiting for him on the beach. The two swords collide violently in mid-air, generating a massive shockwave that mixes green flames and blue lightning around them. Leonard stares at the swordmaster from up close and comments quite sarcastically that this fifth shadow is actually a complete disappointment. The swordmaster mocks the fact that a mere boy was responsible for eliminating his allies and disrupting their invasion plan. The villain points his glowing green weapon in the prota's direction and guarantees with hatred that he will make sure to kill Leonard. Personally, the two warriors face each other on the deserted beach beneath the gigantic teleportation circle that keeps glowing intensely in the clear sky. One of the surviving subordinates observes the bodies of his allies on the ground and panics upon realizing that the boy defeated everyone. Blinded by hatred and fury, the subordinate shouts, asking how Leonard dared to do that to his companions in arms. The warrior charges furiously to attack the boy, yelling that he will cut him into tiny pieces for being a filthy Cardenas demon. Leonard realizes that their leader is indeed a master, and knowing that things have gotten serious, decides he has no choice but to go all out. The subordinate leaps, delivering a deadly attack against Leonard, who merely positions himself firmly to receive and repel the blow. The man steps back horrified and asks in desperation how it's possible for a simple recruit boy to manifest a true aura blade. With an extremely cold gaze, Leonard disdainfully replies that it's none of his business and prepares to deliver the mercy blow. He executes a swift slash that throws his opponent far away, aware that he can only maintain that powerful combat aura for just 3 minutes. Suddenly, the master of the fifth shadow reappears attacking with a devastating fury and shouts for the blonde youth to just die already. The master attacks furiously, calling him a demon, but Leonard notices that the enemy has lost his composure and that it will be much easier to deal with him now. Dodging the blows mid-air with mastery, the blonde youth notices a perfect opening and plans to deliver an immediate counterattack. He focuses on closing the distance between them while nimbly dodging every deadly advance from the Cruzy's master. The villain gives a wicked smile and reveals that he caught Leonard, leaving the boy in shock upon realizing he had fallen straight into a trap. He reveals that he used a devastating poison technique and guarantees that even a single, tiny drop of that substance is enough to kill. The master sadistically explains that the poison will reach Leonard's heart in a few seconds, destroying his entire mana flow and pulse. To the villain's surprise, Leonard advances laughing and ironically thanks him for the detailed explanation about the poison before going on the attack. The prota concentrates his pure mana spectacularly into a single point, completely neutralizing the effects of the enemy poison in the air. The Cruzy's villain falls into complete shock upon seeing that the deadly poison had no effect, screaming desperately to understand how that is possible. Leonard reflects on whether his heart possesses resistance to both poisons and magic. Preparing a swift charge while saying he had already warned his opponent, he collides his blade with force against the invader's defense and coldly states that this secret about his power is something the enemy doesn't need to know. Feeling the immense pressure of the strike, the man lets out a groan of pain and realizes he is being pushed back by the blonde youth's devastating strength. In a final, desperate effort, the opponent channels all his remaining mana to summon several green energy serpents around him. The gigantic snakes strike the ground with absurd violence, creating a dust curtain while Leonard moves with extreme agility to escape. The prota observes the chaotic attacks and wonders if the enemy completely lost control, or if he is just swinging blindly to try and hit something. Realizing that attempting a direct approach would be too difficult due to the energy barrier, he begins to map out a new combat tactic. Leonard concentrates a massive amount of power into the tip of his sword and vows that he will pierce through that barrier with a single definitive energy blast. A torrent of spiraling blue flames explodes from the kid's hands, colliding head-on against the massive green serpents and destroying their defense. The impact of the magical explosion hits the invader dead-on, sending him flying through the air as he coughs up a large amount of blood. Badly bruised and furious, the warrior curses the prota, screaming in anger at being cornered like that by a rookie kid. Overcome by madness, he claims that even if it costs his own life, he will make sure to take Leonard down with him straight to the underworld. The battlefield is swallowed by massive columns of dark energy that begin to explode and destroy everything around the beach in a devastating way. Leonard notices that his opponent is releasing his mana far beyond the body's safe limits, risking everything he has on that final, desperate attack. He advances by leaping over the massive green serpents trying to block him, aware that this initial charge is just a distraction. Keeping total calm in the middle of the chaos, the youth concludes that he only needs to move fast and deliver a single, accurate slash to end the fight. He focuses his massive combat aura directly onto the edge of the blade, preparing a pinpoint attack against the invader's defense. with a single perfect arching movement of his sword. Leonard cuts through the massive green energy serpents as if they were just dry leaves. With the path finally clear, the blonde youth launches into a free fall toward his unarmed opponent, knowing he can easily reach him now. Leonard delivers a devastating energy punch that hits the center of the enemy's chest armor dead on, shattering his defense with the tremendous impact. Suddenly, a small glowing runic circle activates beneath Leonard's feet, revealing the seal of a magical immobilization trap called Shockbound. Leonard is shocked to realize that the enemy was also hiding a powerful magical trap tool as a last resort for defense. The master of the fifth shadow grabs Leonard tightly by the collar, flashing a sadistic smile of victory while saying the boy was careless. He reveals that he pretended to attack blindly just to draw Leonard close, guaranteeing that at this distance there would be zero chance of survival. The villain begins to charge his destructive green energy around them and bids a cruel farewell, telling the blonde youth to burn in the depths. An imposing voice echoes through the area saying that won't be happening, interrupting the villain's attack completely unexpectedly. The legendary commander Fabian appears floating majestically in the sky with his massive red cape, leaving the cruise's master totally terrified. The villain panics completely upon recognizing the commander's overwhelming aura and shouts, asking when that monster arrived on the island. Fabian delivers a colossal blue energy slash that cuts through the air, solemnly declaring that this strike is on behalf of all his men who fell there. Leonard drops to his knees in the sand, coughing a bit, and ironically jokes, asking if the enemy really wanted to kill him that badly on the beach. He mocks, saying the villain was so focused on killing him that he didn't even notice Fabian's approach, leaving the invader totally speechless. Fabian walks imposingly across the sand to the young hero and calmly apologizes for the delay in reaching the scene of the clash. He praises the young man's extraordinary growth since their last meeting and thanks him for saving Tutor Bradley's life with his quick strategy. Bradley approaches with his hand on his chest and expresses his full gratitude to Leonard, commenting afterward that he has a few questions he would like to clear up exhausted from that entire intense battle. Leonard gives a slight tired smile and politely asks if they could talk after he gets some sleep. Understandingly, the commander smiles in a friendly way and immediately agrees, telling the youth to take plenty of time to rest and recover his strength. However, Fabian's gaze soon turns extremely serious again as he observes the overall situation around the training camp. The commander coldly warns that while Leonard rests, he will begin to clear out the rest of the enemy trash still scattered across the island. Bound by tenders of energy, the defeated cruise's leader stammers furiously and vows with hatred that this clash isn't truly over yet. Fabian just glares at him with deep contempt, dryly commenting on that defeated enemy warrior's inhuman and useless obsession. He raises his glowing sword and coldly decrees that this entire nightmare of the cruise's invasion ends once and for all at this very moment. With a merciless movement of his blade, the commander executes the villain without hesitation before the watchful eye of the young recruit lying on the ground. Suddenly, Fabian widens his eyes as he senses a powerful presence and realizes that the hooded figure guided him straight to the coast without him noticing. A residual magical force from the villain wraps around Leonard's body by surprise, screaming that it will drag him along to destruction either way. The runic circle in the sky glows with a blinding intensity and suddenly activates, swallowing the entire beach with a colossal explosion of white light. The scene changes abruptly to a dark forest at night, where Leonard appears holding a spear near a companion passed out on the ground. Wielding his lightning sword, Leonard tells his opponent to shut up and coldly asks if he thought some random piece of trash could shake him. From high up on a tree trunk, he analyzes the threats around him, aware that the lizard men in that area are extremely strong and dangerous. Observing the trails of black blood left on the forest floor, the Proto concludes with concern that they did indeed take his companion from there. Fabian laments that the invaders used the incomplete mass teleportation to abduct Leonard, leaving them without any clue as to where the boy ended up. Bradley blames himself bitterly for what happened, admitting with remorse that he lowered his guard by mistakenly thinking that their main target on the island was himself. He comments that he never imagined the real target of the kidnappers would be Leonard, suspecting that the boy was taken because of his frightening potential. He seriously concludes that the enemies saw Leonard as such a massive threat that they even betrayed their own beliefs just to capture him. Either way, Bradley reflects on how absurd it is to see a rookie recruit manage to fight on equal terms against a legendary warrior from the transcendent realm. He admits to Fabian that, despite having trained many excellent recruits throughout his life, he has never witnessed a growth as frightening as Leonard's. The tutor looks at the horizon and thoughtfully murmurs that a new, unprecedented legend is about to be written in blood in the history of the Cardenas family. Bradley suggests requesting immediate reinforcements from the main house of the Cardenas family, and Fabian immediately agrees, leaving the command of the search under his responsibility. Fabian glares at him with absolute firmness and categorically declares that the Cardenas family needs to find that blonde boy no matter what it costs. Meanwhile, the scene shows Leonard unconscious and floating adrift on a piece of wood in the middle of the blue ocean under the sunlight. A massive ship appears sailing through the calm waters, and a young female sailor on the deck points curiously as she spots something strange floating toward them. Leonard slowly opens his eyes as he feels the constant rocking and the strong smell of sea spray around him, immediately deducing that he must be aboard a vessel. He tries to sit up in bed with his hand on his forehead and is greeted by a beautiful young woman with orange hair, who smiles in relief upon realizing the young man finally woke up. The girl says she has many questions and demands answers in exchange for saving his life, leaving Leonard confused to hear that he was rescued in that manner. She apologizes for her lack of manners and extends her hand warmly, introducing herself as Francis, captain of the ship Aquamarine, before asking his name. Leonard observes the captain's friendly gesture calmly, realizing that he is indeed in a safe place and surrounded by friendly allies. He shakes the young woman's hand firmly and introduces himself simply as Leonard, coming directly from the Grand Arcadia Empire. Francis reacts in surprise upon hearing the Empire's name, commenting that this place is extremely far from there and asking how he ended up so far from home. Leonard looks away thoughtfully for a moment and calmly replies, only that this entire situation was nothing more than a major accident. He makes up a story that he ended up getting caught in a spatial magic spell by surprise, and that he can barely remember anything that happened after that moment. The serious, dark-haired guard named Marion glares at him quite suspiciously and directly asks if the young man is part of the Cardenas family. Marion points out that, for his age, Leonard's body is incredibly well-trained, something that would only make sense if he truly belonged to the legendary Cardenas clan. Leonard notices his family's fame even across the ocean, and quietly confirms that he is from Cardenas. Questioning if there would be any problem with that worried, the guard whispers into Francis's ear that it would be very dangerous to get involved with someone from Cardenas, advising the captain to act with caution. The conversation is suddenly interrupted when a sailor comes running desperately into the room, begging Captain Francis to hurry down to the docks immediately, exhausted and panting. The man tries to catch his breath with difficulty while warning in a panic that the dangerous thugs in the area are attacking the place. He reveals that the violent gang of the criminal Luciano Peterson is causing a real ruckus and terrorizing the workers at the docks. Marion grits her teeth in pure hatred for the criminals, complaining that those cowardly rats waited precisely for the day they would be busy with the council. Francis apologizes to the blonde youth for not being able to host him properly right now, while Leonard notices from her serious expression that there is unfinished business with the gang. Putting on her captain's coat in a hurry, Francis gently lets him know that as soon as Leonard recovers, he is completely free to leave whenever he wants. She points to the corner of the room, indicating that the young man's clothes, sword, and dimensional bag were all stored there with great care. Before she runs out of the room, Leonard calls out to her and asks the real reason why she decided to save the life of a complete stranger at sea. She turns around and replies with a beautiful, friendly smile that she decided to save him simply because he looked like he needed help, and she never abandons anyone. Observing the captain leave in a hurry, Leonard murmurs to himself with irony that she is the one who truly seems to be in need of help at the moment. The scene shifts outside, revealing the massive wooden walkway of the docks connecting the majestic ship Aquamarine directly to the beach. The arrogant Luciano Peterson appears smirking mockingly at the docks, making fun of Captain Francis and her bodyguard's arrival. In a mocking tone, Luciano tells Francis to smile a bit after so much time, but Marion immediately draws her blade in a rage and tells him to shut his mouth once and for all. The blonde criminal gives a start of irritation upon seeing the loyal bodyguard's aggressive and hostile reaction to his cheap provocations. Luciano says he wants to speak to the owner and that Mutz should stay quiet, leaving Marion enraged to the point of seriously threatening him over that low insult. Marion grits her teeth in absolute fury, repeating Luciano Peterson's name with deep and visible hatred in every detail of her expression. He walks assertively past the guard, telling Francis to keep her mutts in check, claiming disdainfully that this conversation should be between leaders. Only Luciano approaches Francis and directly demands that she stop being so stubborn and hand over the ship Aquamarine to his gang. Once and for all, he points to the vessel, claiming that such a grand ship is a waste in her hands, calling it a bankrupt royal inheritance about to rot away. He continues the provocations by cruelly saying that just because her father passed away doesn't mean everything would automatically belong to her now. Frances keeps her stance firm, despite all the emotional pain, and coldly orders Luciano to leave, guaranteeing that she will never hand over her ship. Luciano says he is offering a good price, and tells her to sell the vessel amicably before things start to get dangerous and violent. Luciano tries to make one more threat, but is interrupted at that exact moment by a swift movement that causes a massive puddle of blood to gush onto the ground. Leonard appears by surprise beside them with a bloody fist, and calmly asks Frances if she would mind if he eliminated that nuisance right then, and they're totally shocked by the frightening speed of that sudden attack. Frances desperately begs Leonard to spare Luciano's life. Luciano falls to the ground, agonizing in pain, as he sees his severed arm gushing blood. While Leonard coldly orders the thug to go pick up his limb from the ground, Luciano lets out a wild howl of pure pain, with his eyes wide and his face completely covered in a cold sweat from the shock. From the middle of the crowd, one of Luciano's henchmen charges furiously toward Leonard, screaming with hatred and ordering his men to kill everyone there. Leonard moves like a swift blur through the battlefield, delivering multiple precise slashes that quickly disarm the attackers. With extreme ease, he grabs the wrist of one of the henchmen trying to strike him, completely blocking the enemy's advance. Without hesitating, the blonde youth delivers a violent kick directly against the man's face, sending him flying backward with a loud groan of pain. Frances and Marion walk calmly down the docks, observing with incredulity the ease with which all the henchmen were defeated on the ground. Marion comments in disbelief that she didn't even have time to draw her own weapon, while Frances wonders impressively if that could be the true power of Cardenas. The wounded Luciano Peterson manages to quickly recover and reattach his severed arm, using some mysterious ability. Totally defeated and humiliated, the villain drops to his knees on the ground, while Marion asks the captain how they should deal with him from now on. Both stare at the fallen man with some hesitation, aware that Luciano Peterson possesses dangerous connections that cannot simply be ignored. Noticing the strange silence of the two young women, Leonard looks at them with curiosity and calmly asks if there is something wrong happening there. Frances seriously explains that, despite looking like just some random henchman, Luciano is the illegitimate son of the most powerful and influential political figure in Atlantis. She begins to explain details about the organization and the laws governing that special coastal region where they find themselves. She reveals that the Maritime Union of Atlantis is entirely governed by a special council of leaders who exercise absolute rule over those seas. Luciano's influential father is the powerful Pablo L. Orlando Peterson, one of the most feared and dangerous figures in the entire high leadership of the Union Council. Knowing that the enemy's father is one of the 5 most powerful leaders, Leonard realizes that the situation is far more problematic than he had imagined. The blonde youth calls Frances by her name, immediately drawing the orange-haired captain's attention with his serious and focused expression. With total calmness, Leonard proposes to act as Frances's personal bodyguard for a while to help her with the threats she faces. He reflects that staying by her side will be useful for resolving local issues, earning her trust, and gathering important information about the region. Frances repeats his proposal in surprise, while observing the massive number of defeated henchmen groaning on the ground around the boy. Regaining her spirit, she flashes a radiant smile and accepts the proposal immediately. Saying with joy that he is more than welcome to the group, Frances warmly shakes Leonard's hand under Marion's friendlier gaze, enthusiastically stating that she will be counting entirely on his help. With a slight friendly smile on his face, the blonde youth politely replies that he will also be under Frances's care. From that moment on, Marion asks what they should do with Luciano Peterson, warning that it would be best to lock him up somewhere safe to avoid more future trouble. Frances guarantees that as long as they don't kill him, everything will be fine, revealing that even Luciano's own father already seems to be totally sick and tired of him. Leonard feels relieved to note that the council is willing to overlook what happened, as long as Luciano's dignity isn't completely destroyed. Frances excitedly lets him know that she urgently needs to go to an important place and warns that she will need to count on her new bodyguard services immediately. The blonde youth simply nods calmly and replies in a quiet manner that he perfectly understood her orders. Leonard asks if he should call her captain, but the young woman laughs warmly and says he can just call her Fran if he doesn't mind. He agrees and says he will be under Fran's care, leaving the girl slightly blushing and surprised to hear the affectionate nickname coming from him. Marion finds her boss's shy behavior odd as they walk toward the large and majestic trading city under a beautiful blue sky. They enter the streets of the beautiful coastal city, surrounded by monuments of magical water that float spectacularly around the place. Impressed by all that beauty, Leonard comments that the city's magical architecture is fantastic and that he has never seen anything like it in the Arcadia Empire. Frances explains that since it is a trading city, appearance is everything, but in the end, it's all decoration to attract the massive number of adventurers there. She points to a colossal building and reveals that this is the Bermuda, the official administration center for all adventurer groups in Atlantis. The youth reads the magical panels at the entrance, identifying Francis's group as the Aquamarine Guild. Officially registered under the rank B code, Francis extends her magical device to confirm her credentials, receiving immediate clearance from the system to access the prestigious Zephyros Hall. Francis proudly explains that Zephyros Hall serves as a luxurious lounge area, exclusive for rank B adventurer groups. With a calm and confident expression, the blonde youth nods and tells them to enter the hall to sort out the group's registration. The group's firm steps echo softly over the beautiful and luxurious patterned carpet, covering the entire floor of the building's sumptuous hallway. Impressed by the extreme luxury of the facilities, the Proto mentally concludes that rank B must represent a very prestigious and high category. He reflects thoughtfully that, if his assumption is correct, Francis's Aquamarine Guild must be a much more powerful and influential group than he supposed. The friendly staff member Clara greets them with a beautiful smile and offers her assistance to help them with the entire group registration process. Francis celebrates, saying that with Leonard joining, the group will have 3 members, leaving the blonde youth shocked to discover that the entire guild consists only of the 2 of them. Clara asks if Leonard has a combat specialty, explaining that she needs to evaluate the team's true offensive power to update the registry. Suddenly, an arrogant adventurer sitting in the back mocks Leonard's appearance, claiming mockingly that the blonde youth is only there to entertain the ladies. Leonard calmly asks if he should teach the guy a lesson, but Fran asks him to let it go, saying she is completely used to that type of provocation. The man continues his mockings arrogantly, saying with contempt that the blonde youth was only brought in to fill the minimum number of members required by the guild. In a fraction of a second, and before anyone could react, an extremely swift movement cuts through the air toward the mocking adventurer. Leonard appears by surprise right before the man instantaneously, leaving him completely frozen and in a panic, with the tip of his sword pointed at his face. The arrogant adventurer stays completely paralyzed and begins to break into a cold sweat with Leonard's sharp sword pressed against his neck. Leonard calmly asks if that is already enough to evaluate his combat skills. Clara replies, stamped mirroring that it is certainly enough, and then asks where the blonde youth came from. Leonard reflects thoughtfully that, based on Marion's previous reaction, it's better not to reveal that he came from the Arcadia Empire. He walks toward the counter, aware that simply refusing to answer would also look very suspicious. The young man replies that he is from the Kyrgyz kingdom, although he mentally admits he hates the fact that this was the only place he remembered. The attendant stamps the document and announces that this finally concludes his official registration in the Aquamarine group. Francis gets extremely emotional and joyfully celebrates the fact that her group finally has a new recruit. Leonard calls her attention a bit awkwardly, letting her know they have already finished what they had to do there. Francis realizes her exaggeration and internally regrets letting go of her dignity as captain in front of everyone. Marion tries to hide the embarrassment by coughing lightly, congratulates the youth on the good job, and says that now he is officially a member of the group. Francis suggests they take the rest of the day off so Leonard can walk around and get to know the city's surroundings better. She adds with a sincere smile that she will be counting entirely on his help from that moment on. Leonard gives a slight smirk upon hearing the new captain's friendly words. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the young man politely asks if he could ask a small favor of her. A short time later, they arrive before a large and imposing double wooden door in another part of the city. A voice from inside asks if he is Leonard, commenting that Captain Fran had already spoken about him and invites him to enter. The blonde youth politely asks for permission as he pushes the doors open and enters the luxurious room. The woman with long dark hair analyzes him with a watchful eye and immediately comments that he doesn't look like a mage at all. She snaps her fingers elegantly and asks if it is really true that he wishes to learn about magic. While making various surrounding objects float with her magic, she tells the youth to make himself comfortable and tell her everything in detail. After listening intently, the woman understands the situation, while Leonard explains that everything started since he was swallowed by that spatial magic. The young man confesses he realized the need to learn how to handle magic, since at the moment he barely understands anything about the subject. The woman rests her face on her hand charmingly and thoughtfully, says she perfectly understands the boy's concern. Esther, a 4th-level mage from the Atlantis Magic Tower, concludes that his goal is not to become an ordinary magic swordsman. She explains that the best way to learn magic is by getting used to it, revealing that there is a very simple method even for swordsmen. Esther shows a spirit stone and explains that, just as aura users use these stones, he can absorb magical circuits engraved in them. Leonard looks a bit hesitant and says his main goal isn't necessarily to learn how to cast actual spells. Without listening, Esther presses the stone against his chest, guaranteeing that this is the fastest method, unless his body is unusual. The mage seriously reflects that guiding the youth is also a personal responsibility she must fulfill. She reveals herself to be a member of the Aquamarine group and says she needs to guide the rookie to prevent the captain from coming to complain to her later. Leonard groans in pain from the strong energy, leaving Esther confused to notice that a normal person should absorb those circuits without any trouble. Observing the violent reaction of the blonde youth's body, the mage begins to suspect that his physical constitution is extremely out of the ordinary. An absurd amount of magical energy explodes from Leonard's body, causing him to begin levitating and completely terrifying the mage. The massive power released spreads throughout Esther's luxurious hall, making the windows vibrate and releasing various bright sparks of mana. The strong vibration caused by the sudden release of energy is so intense that it even makes the tea in the cup overflow and splash. Esther manages to grab her cup in time and tries to catch her breath, relieved to realize that the turbulence has finally settled down. She approaches with some concern and asks the exhausted blonde youth if he is feeling all right after what happened. Still panting and breaking into a cold sweat from the intense experience, Leonard calmly replies that he is fine. Leonard notices in surprise that the Cardenas dragon blood completely rewrote the original magic that was engraved on the spirit stone. He lets her know he is more than fine, revealing that somehow he managed to rephrase one of the spells he just absorbed from the stone. Esther is immediately perplexed when the blonde youth announces that the spell in question is the famous magic missile. The mage recognizes that it is a basic magic, but is shocked to see the boy fire an incredibly swift and powerful barrage of blue projectiles. Leonard calmly explains that he considered the original form inefficient, so he redesigned it into the shape of sharp daggers. Esther screams, totally incredulous, questioning how he managed to alter the base of the spell and fire 5 of them at the same time on his first try. Ignoring her amazement, Leonard calmly asks if he could examine her magical circuits. Leaving the mage confused by the request, he explains with total seriousness that, by looking at her magical circuits, he can see exactly where things can be improved. Meanwhile, outside the imposing magic tower of Atlantis, the sun shines intensely in the blue sky. Inside a luxurious library in the tower, dozens of sheets of paper float calmly through the air. An elegant man wearing a blue suit controls and organizes various books and documents floating around him using his magic. Jack Russell asks with a sigh for his disciple not to drag him into a massive headache with her whims. He introduces himself as Jack Russell, the chief elder of the Atlantis Magic Tower and a powerful 7th-level mage, complaining that he is already far too busy. Esther smiles, saying she knows his routine very well, while Leonard politely introduces himself as a member of the Aquamarine group. Jack warns that outsiders are rarely allowed in there and asks them to quickly explain everything that happened that was so important. With a proud smile on her face, Esther reveals to her master that she finally managed to advance to the 5th level of magic. The elder is surprised and questions why this happened now, since she spent entire years stuck at the same level without progressing. To prove her evolution, the young woman asks him to see it with his own eyes and begins to concentrate a strong magical flame in her hand. She casts a fireball spell, causing intense flames to begin circulating intensely around her entire body. She shows that she can now alter the shape of her magic, compressing and spinning the flames into a disc to maximize its offensive power. Esther reveals that Leonard fixed her magical circuits and gave her advice, but Jack reprimands her, saying she shouldn't use that magic inside there. Esther realizes the mistake she just made by using such a destructive spell in an enclosed space and looks completely embarrassed. She tries to apologize desperately while running alongside Leonard, explaining that she still can't perfectly control this new form. Jack is left in absolute shock upon realizing that Leonard masters the realm of transformation, an advanced technique that should only be achieved at the 6th level. The elder puts out the flames with extreme ease using his magic and comments with a slight smile on his face that he finds all of that very interesting. He explains that overcoming magical barriers without prior intention is something that is only achieved when the person themselves understands the essence of the technique on their own. Jack Russell turns to his disciple and seriously warns her that she now owes Leonard a debt she couldn't repay even in an entire lifetime. The master walks toward them and asks if Esther brought him there precisely because she already knew the greatness of the boy's talent. Jack extends his hand to Leonard and proposes that he become his official disciple, guaranteeing that he won't find another opportunity as good as this one. Leonard thanks him for the honor, but refuses on the spot, saying he has already chosen the path of the sword, which leaves the chief elder quite disappointed with the answer. As a thank you, the elder grants Leonard the same authority as Esther, ensuring him unrestricted access to the tower, to all knowledge, and to the items there. He also promises to maintain and cultivate an excellent diplomatic partnership relation between the powerful magic tower and the Aquamarine Adventurer Group. The blonde youth politely thanks him and replies with a slight smirk that he will certainly make very frequent use. Of all these new benefits, Leonard contentedly reflects that a friendly relationship with the Magic Tower will be a massive and crucial advantage for the growth of the Aquamarine group. Back at the lounge in Bermuda, Francis is shocked to learn that Leonard met with the Chief Elder and that he promised to maintain good relations with the group. She gets extremely excited and celebrates that the Tower is a giant organization equivalent to the Council, unable to believe they secured such a connection. Ignoring the excitement, the young man points to a document on the table and asks what that list full of specific names is. Francis explains that they are people she would like to recruit, since without increasing the number of members they cannot expand their activities. She comments that without the ship Aquamarine, it would be very difficult for their group to even maintain the current rank B adventurer status. Leonard analyzes the situation calmly and concludes that the stronger the new members they recruit are, the better it will be for the group. Francis agrees hesitantly, a bit confused and surprised by the young companion's direct and serious line of reasoning. Leonard points to the hall, saying he spotted someone useful, while the man from before yells furiously, asking to be taken down from there at once. The guy yells insults against the silver-haired elf girl who trapped him up there, furious and saying she won't get away with this. The one-eyed young elf, known as Ninian, calmly draws an arrow infused with a powerful green-colored magical energy. The man lets out a high-pitched cry of panic as the magical shot grazes past him with overwhelming force and speed. Ninian turns her back and coldly tells the guy to thank goodness they met in that protected place, calling him a piece of trash. Suddenly, a few steps approach and a voice questions in a mocking tone if she isn't going too far with her attitudes. The men mock her and tell her to stop being stubborn and just join the Santa Maria group already, reminding her that her sister's rescue is extremely expensive. Leonard interferes in the conversation in an intimidating manner and categorically states that the ones crossing the line there are them. In an extremely fast and precise movement, the blonde youth draws the string of a bow and fires a powerful projectile against the provocateurs. Ninian and the other men watch in absolute shock as the magical arrow cuts through the air at a frightening speed. Ninian stares at the newcomer with great surprise and, perplexed by such skill, asks who exactly he is. He introduces himself in a totally imposing and calm manner as Leonard, the new member of the Aquamarine Adventurer Group. The youth returns the weapon, thanking Clara for the loan, leaving Francis and Marion completely dumbfounded to discover that he also knows how to use a bow. Leonard addresses the elf and proposes that she join their group, guaranteeing that it won't be a bad deal and promises she won't lose out. Ninian reflects that his shot was at a level far superior to her own technique and thinks it would be incredible if she could learn that from him. One of her provocateurs mocks the proposal, warning Ninian that the Aquamarine is about to go under and no one is going to save her on a sinking ship. He continues mocking and arrogantly claims that, unlike other useless groups, the captain of the Santa Maria group is a magnificent man. Suddenly, a gigantic and muscular man appears behind the henchman, telling him to stop talking nonsense, instantly terrifying him. He proudly introduces himself as Christopher Conrad, the legendary captain of the Santa Maria group, saying they don't owe anyone an explanation. The gigantic warrior glares at Leonard with disdain and mocks,
saying that insignificant rank B adventurers would never be able to understand them. Leonard notices immediately that, despite Christopher's rough appearance, the man is just a single step away from reaching the transcendent realm. He knows that facing him head-on would be disadvantageous,
but also recognizes that an archer of Ninian's level is an indispensable asset for naval battles. The youth concludes that he cannot let her slip away under any circumstances and decides he will do everything to convince her to join his group, no matter what it takes. At that moment, Ninian recalls a fond memory from the past, where a joyful voice affectionately called her big sister. Although Ninian questioned being called that since she was only a half-elf, little Vivian joyfully insisted that their mother had said they were sisters. She internally explains that they are half-sisters from different fathers, and that Vivian is a spirit user with a talent that doesn't even compare to her own tainted blood. But even with those differences, Vivian was always her best and only true friend, besides being her only remaining family member. However, all that daily happiness and peace crumbled in a single instant when the place where they lived was suddenly attacked wounded, and with her eyes slashed, she heard one of the invaders mockingly laugh about the elves' homeland. And if Vivian really thought her rescue signal would work, Christopher approached the fallen Ninian and, showing a signed contract, cruelly revealed that little Vivian now completely belonged to him. She cried and begged for him to return her sister in exchange for her own life, but he just laughed mockingly, disdaining her weak skills. With utter contempt, the man coldly stated that he had absolutely no use for a worthless half-elf like her, and rudely ordered her to get lost from there. Back in the present, she clenches her fists in frustration for knowing she doesn't have the strength to beat him, feeling powerless for not being able to save her dear sister. Breaking the tense silence, Leonard takes a firm step forward and openly challenges the captain of the Santa Maria group to an official duel. Everyone around is left in shock, while the youth proposes that they wager Vivian's ownership contract as the main prize of that dispute. Marion immediately panics and furiously shouts at Leonard, warning that he doesn't have the right to decide something so dangerous like that on his own. She desperately begs her captain to stop the boy, warning that this means starting a direct war against the entire powerful Santa Maria group. However, Francis glares at him with seriousness, aware that this is their single golden chance to recruit an excellent archer and a spirit user. With total calmness and confidence in his tone of voice, the blonde youth politely asks for her to leave everything under his responsibility this time. After hesitating for a brief moment, Francis makes her decision, looks at the young man firmly, and convincingly says she fully trusts him. Suddenly, Ninian firmly grabs the blonde youth's arm and asks with a confused expression what on earth he thinks he is doing there. She mockingly questions if the boy is already losing his nerve or if he went completely crazy for getting involved in a problem. That isn't his. Christopher grabs Leonard's shirt collar with extreme violence, laughing furiously and incredulously at the audacity of such a young boy challenging him. The giant demands to know what they are going to wager, stating that a spirit user is valuable, and demands the purchase rights of the ship Aquamarine. As a guarantee, Francis takes control and accepts the wager, but demands that Christopher also put on the line the valuable Rank A exploration rights that his group possesses. Christopher stays thoughtful in silence before the bold proposal, while Leonard mentally thanks his captain for the excellent support she gave him. The big guy lets out a laugh and says he accepts the terms, but imposes one more crucial last-minute condition before making the fight official. He demands that the duelist be exclusively a member of the Aquamarine group. To prevent the young women from bringing in some outside swordmaster by surprise, to fight, Leonard firmly replies that the duel will be strictly individual, being a direct one-on-one combat between the two of them, with no right to objections. Christopher turns his back laughing and warns in a mocking tone that he will be looking forward to the big day of the clash against the blonde boy. Shortly after, inside the Grand Magic Tower of Atlantis, a shout echoes furiously, asking if the blonde youth has completely lost his mind. A hand slams with extreme force against the office's wooden table, demonstrating immense indignation at the news they just received. Esther explains, extremely irritated, that, despite his rough appearance, Conrad is the powerful captain of a Rank A guild and a formidable magic swordsman. Frances takes a sip of her tea in a grumpy way and grumbles that she accepted everything only because that guy makes her very angry and is disgusting. Esther laments, saying that even if she and Ninian fought together, they wouldn't stand a single chance of victory against him, and now it's too late to back down. Ninian, downcast, asks for forgiveness, admitting that all that mess happened because of her fault. But Frances tries to calm her, saying they need to focus on the future now. Suddenly, the sound of metal echoes through the place as Leonard partially unsheathes his blade, which begins to glow intensely with a bluish aura. Before the watchful eyes of all the young women in the lounge, Leonard stands imposingly and begins to channel a massive amount of power. Esther is left in absolute shock with wide eyes, paralyzed before that sudden demonstration of immense power coming from the boy. Upon seeing the mythical aura blade form, the mage stammers in disbelief, remembering that Leonard was supposed to be only at the third stage of the external strength realm. The youth calmly replies that this information is only valid on paper, revealing that he simply never had a real reason to fight with full strength until now. He raises his glowing sword and states with total conviction that, with his current power level, he stands zero chance of losing to Conrad. Francis flashes a massive smile of happiness and celebrates, saying she knew his potential and that she was right to place all her trust in him. Leonard thanks his captain's words, while she joyfully concludes that since Conrad hasn't reached the swordmaster level yet, their victory is guaranteed. However, Ninian adopts a more cautious stance and asks if they shouldn't map out a strategy to deal with his magic, and not just his sword. At that moment, firm steps echo through the place, and a familiar voice suddenly appears, warning in a confident tone that there is nothing to worry about. Chief Elder Jack Russell enters the room accompanied by his disciple, and states that there is absolutely zero possibility of Conrad being more genius than Leonard. After quietly listening to the young women's entire account of the wager, the powerful mage seriously states that he perfectly understands the full gravity of the situation. The elder settles into his chair and questions if the reason they came there is to ask him to act as the official witness for that important duel. Leonard politely confirms yes, explaining that since the ship Aquamarine itself is on the line, he wishes to avoid any type of cheating from the adversaries. Jack Russell agrees, smiling, and says doing that will be very easy, reinforcing that Leonard, after all, is the great benefactor of his disciple Esther. Meanwhile, in another room, a man with his back to the window comments in a dark tone that he doesn't believe the opponent is above using cheap tricks. He notices his subordinate's approach and coldly whispers that Captain Conrad has finally just arrived at the location. Conrad kneels with total respect and asks if he was called there by Counselor Pablo L. Orlando Peterson, one of the most influential figures in Atlantis. Pablo astutely states that he already knows the entire situation and sees the duel as the perfect opportunity for them to get their hands on the ship Aquamarine. He throws a black pill to the captain and orders him to take it before the duel, guaranteeing it will temporarily give him a power that surpasses that of a swordmaster. Conrad looks a bit outraged to receive a secret elixir to deal with a mere boy, proudly stating he can easily crush Leonard without that. With an extremely threatening gaze, Pablo coldly questions if he looks like he is asking for a favor, making the captain immediately apologize, entirely terrified. He warns that the Aquamarine group must have some trick up their sleeve and rigorously orders Conrad to guarantee the victory and take their ship with no excuses. Regaining his confidence and with a wicked smile on his face, Conrad guarantees his master he will do everything to ensure the absolute success of the plan. Meanwhile, Leonard prepares focused and mentally determines that he will win that battle either way, no matter what happens. The long-awaited day of the duel finally arrives under a beautiful and radiant blue sky in the majestic coastal city of Atlantis. The stage for the clash is the Great Auditorium of Bermuda, a place officially advertised as an event hall, but which in reality functions as a combat arena. The crowd in the stands is extremely excited for the show, and the spectators talk among themselves, speculating about the values of their bets. One of the men asks the others for calm, stating with total certainty that Conrad's victory is already something entirely guaranteed to happen. They hear the rumors from the crowd that Leonard is just a boy with no chance, and Frances tries to keep her calm and control her nervousness. The announcer proclaims in a loud voice the entrance of the fighters into the arena, introducing the feared Conrad of the Santa Maria group and the young Leonard of the Aquamarine group. The announcer highlights that the opponents are already staring fixedly at each other, and adds that a duel with such high wagers needs a witness of great authority. He asks for the entire audience to give a warm welcome to the illustrious chief, Elder of the Atlantis Magic Tower, the great Jack Russell. Jack observes everything calmly as he notices that everything is going according to plan, while remembering the tense conversation about wagering all the group's funds. In the memory, Esther is completely dumbfounded with surprise to discover that she was supposed to be the one responsible for placing that risky, high-value bet Frances had begged, holding Esther's hand, explaining that she was the only one who could help them multiply the Aquamarine group's funds. She explained that since there is barely any public information about Leonard in the Adventurer Registry, practically the entire audience will bet their riches on Conrad. Jack concluded that the captain was deliberately seeking a high-risk bet with a massive return. Taking advantage of Leonard's total anonymity, Leonard himself reassured Esther, guaranteeing that with the excellent sword borrowed from the tower in his hands, he wouldn't lose that dispute by any means. Faced with such firmness, Esther agreed to risk it and bet all the group's funds on him, receiving the confident confirmation and a smile from the blonde youth. Back in the arena, the announcer shouts, giving the official signal for the start of the combat, causing the opponents to take their first firm steps onto the sand. Conrad approaches Leonard arrogantly and warns him in a cruel tone of voice that eliminations committed inside that arena receive no punishment. Totally unfazed by the big guy's threat, the blonde youth only smirks and calmly asks if the giant is afraid. The captain gets extremely irritated by the kid's mockery and angrily grumbles that he keeps acting with arrogance even while being about to fall. Vowing to crush his opponent's confident face until nothing is left, the captain of the Santa Maria group suddenly summons and fires a massive fireball. The sphere of flames collides violently with the arena floor, generating a devastating explosion of fire and sand on all sides of the stage. In a spectacular demonstration of agility, Leonard leaps high to perfectly dodge the entire torrent of destructive flames coming his direction. Upon realizing that his opponent is a problematic 5th-level mage, he decides to immediately utilize the great power of his sword borrowed from the tower. He channels mana through the weapon, which reveals itself to be a first-class magical artifact, capable of perfectly amplifying and guiding spells. With a swift movement, the youth summons an extremely sharp wind magic to deflect Conrad's own fire spell right back at him. Conrad is totally horrified and in shock upon being hit, screaming in surprise to discover that the boy is also a skilled magic swordsman. Taking advantage of his opponent's dropped guard, Leonard advances with extreme speed, delivering a rapid sequence of strikes. The overwhelming force of his advance is so great that it completely shatters the arena's stone floor, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. Even with the stone debris falling around him from the impact of the attack, Leonard remains totally calm and unshakable in the combat. Suddenly, Conrad activates a powerful purple magic on the ground affecting gravity, causing Leonard to feel a massive sudden weight on his legs. He arrogantly states that all the speed in the world will do no good against gravity, while preparing to deliver a powerful electrical punch. Leonard grits his teeth as he is enveloped and hit by the powerful discharge of lightning generated by Conrad's magic. A colossal pillar of yellow electricity explodes right in the center of the arena, illuminating the entire place and startling the crowd watching from the stands. However, before the dust settles, Conrad lets out a gasp of shock as he feels an extremely swift cut rip across his own face by surprise. Giving no reaction time, Leonard quickly reappears amidst the lightning and lands a devastating kick straight to his adversary's jaw, making him bleed. The overwhelming impact of the kick throws Conrad's massive and heavy body with extreme violence straight against the arena's sandy floor. The gigantic warrior lets out a loud groan of pain and spits blood from the tremendous impact received. Completely disoriented by the sudden attack, Leonard observes him from above with total contempt and calmly comments that a magic swordsman who doesn't even draw his sword is someone far too arrogant. While Leonard adjusts himself with his clothes slightly torn by the electricity, Conrad mentally admits he underestimated the boy for resisting the lightning. Totally cornered, Conrad realizes he has no other choice but to swallow the secret energy pill he received from the counselor. The big guy lets out a monstrous roar as a massive amount of dark purple aura begins to violently emanate from his body. With his eyes glowing red and consumed by fury, he shouts with hatred that he will kill the blonde boy, even if it costs his own life. Leonard observes his adversary's increase in power in surprise, noticing that this strength is now at the same level as a swordmaster. The giant charges at high speed toward the blonde youth, who mentally concludes that his opponent indeed had a hidden asset for the fight. Conrad delivers an extremely fast strike, but the blonde youth demonstrates incredible reflexes and manages to dodge the attack at the last millisecond. A trail of blood splatters through the arena air, revealing that the violent charge was strong enough to graze Leonard's skin. Conrad grits his teeth with ferocity under the elixir's effect, determined to give his young opponent not a single second of rest. The captain of the Santa Maria group leaps toward Leonard with his fist charged with dark mana and delivers another brutal attack. Leonard remains completely calm and focused while observing Conrad's massive blade come down toward him at a frightening speed. With extreme dexterity, the boy spins in the air over the giant's attack, perfectly dodging and preparing for the counterattack. Leonard glares at him from above and coldly warns that the playtime is over, leaving the giant totally in shock at his supernatural speed. In a final desperate effort, Conrad channels all his dark energy into his colossal sword's blade to deliver his final blow. Seeing the aura blade form, Leonard gives a slight smirk and comments that his opponent finally decided to fight seriously and use his sword. The blonde youth states that in that case he will respond in kind, channeling a massive amount of brilliant blue energy around his own blade. The two powerful swords collide with full force in the center of the arena, generating a devastating shockwave that shakes the entire structure. Even before the big guy's brute force, Leonard demonstrates an overwhelming superiority and begins to push back his adversary's blade with ease. Conrad falls into absolute desperation upon realizing that a simple boy is also capable of perfectly manifesting the mythical aura blade technique. The devastating power of Leonard's dragon aura explodes against Conrad, throwing him far away and completely shattering his massive weapon into pieces. Before the defeat of Conrad lying unconscious on the ground, one of the judges shouts furiously in the stands claiming that all of this is a fraud. Carmen, the administrator of Bermuda's rank A-Hall, fumes desperately that the duel is invalid because a warrior of that level would never lose to a boy. He internally curses for Conrad having lost even after taking the secret elixir, fearing that his position in Bermuda will be totally ruined if this leaks. Suddenly, Jack Russell appears right behind Carmen and imposingly warns that he has heard enough whining and sore loser complaints for today. Jack severely questions if he plans to treat the deal registered by himself, the chief elder of the Magic Tower, as if it were worth absolutely nothing. Before the legendary elder's intimidating gaze, the Bermuda administrator immediately trembles with fear and stammering denies that he would ever dare cross him. He apologizes for his careless words, while Jack reflects that even that accusation of fraud occurred exactly as Leonard predicted. Satisfied with the fair outcome of the clash, the chief elder turns his back and calmly comments that his work there is already fully completed. Leonard raises his sword over his defeated adversary and coldly asks how they plan to settle this entire situation. Once and for all, a short time passes after the triumphant conclusion of that devastating duel that decided the fate of the Aquamarine Group. The Aquamarine Group's large ship now sails calmly through the beautiful blue waters under the heat of a beautiful sunny day. Captain Francis slaps her hand enthusiastically on the cabin table and joyfully celebrates that their recruitment proposal was finally approved. Francis explains that they now have permission to explore rank A seas, although a few conditions still remain before being officially recognized as rank A. She hugs a gigantic sack of gold coins and celebrates that, thanks to the money won from the duel bet, they won't have to worry about finances for a long time. Francis expresses her sincere gratitude to the blonde youth, who responds in a very humble and polite manner that he feels immensely honored to be able to help. Firm steps echo softly over the ship's wooden deck as a few people approach where Leonard is resting Ninian, and her younger sister approach moved, and the silver-haired elf immensely thanks Leonard for having saved both of their lives. Vivian, a skilled user of wind spirits, introduces herself with a beautiful and radiant smile of gratitude and says she doesn't even know how to thank him for everything. Leonard calmly replies that their interests simply aligned, while Francis appears in the background waving joyfully and introducing herself as the captain. Ninian shyly asks if that is really all he wishes. Questioning if the two sisters couldn't do something more to express their gratitude, Francis interferes in the conversation with a welcoming smile and affectionately states that since they are now her teammates, there is no need for any demands. The captain joyfully pushes Marion by the shoulder so she can guide the two new elf companions to their respective rooms inside the ship. Night soon falls over the waters, and Francis and Leonard are left alone on the ship's deck, observing the vastness of the ocean under a beautiful starry sky. Leonard breaks the silence by calmly asking if his silent presence ended up making everyone decide to go back to their rooms earlier. Francis looks at him with a deep gaze and softly comments that she still hasn't revealed to him the true reason for wanting so badly to reach rank A with her group. The blonde youth quietly replies that she indeed never told him, but admits he can already more or less imagine what the reason behind it is. Surprised, the captain flashes a slight melancholy smile and asks if he would be willing to listen to her for a bit. Venting that it's hard to keep everything inside when you have no one to talk to, Leonard turns toward her attentively and kindly replies that he would love to hear her entire personal story from then on. The narrative then takes us to a flashback of exactly 8 years ago, in front of the sumptuous and imposing headquarters of the Atlantis Union Council. In the large meeting room, the leaders argue heatedly, questioning if they really plan to ignore the dangerous magical rift opened in the 5th Sea Njord. The former captain of the Aquamarine group seriously warns that the rift will soon contaminate the waters with otherworldly energy if they don't take immediate action. In the memory, Pablo Peterson stares at Njord coldly and states that the magical rift's contamination state is being closely monitored by them. He arrogantly states that there won't be any problem for the next 30 years, saying that Njord, being on the front lines, should know that very well. Njord stares back at him with seriousness, and firmly replies that this would only be true if absolutely nothing went wrong in the 5th Sea. Pablo insists they can handle it if something goes wrong, arguing that the rift is a chance to obtain byproducts from the other side, and questions why he is so afraid. Upon hearing such greed coming from the political leader, Njord grits his teeth in pure frustration and anger amidst that tense council discussion. Losing his patience, the captain violently grabs Pablo by his clothes and furiously asks if he went crazy to ignore the danger. Just for the sake of profit, Pablo counters with disdain that these byproducts enriched Atlantis, and decides to ask for the opinion of the other council members present in the meeting. After that, a deafening silence fills the room. Noting that everyone agrees, Pablo comments with disdain that it seems they already have the final answer to that matter. Feeling completely betrayed and outraged by that corrupt leadership, Njord slams his fist with extreme force onto the table. He internally curses with immense bitterness upon realizing that absolutely everyone there is completely blinded by greed and the glare of gold. He concludes that they can no longer count on the support of the other rank A groups and orders the entire Aquamarine crew to prepare to set sail immediately. Determined to protect the sea on his own, the legendary captain convincingly warns that his group will close every last one of the existing magical rifts. With the crew responding in unison to his command, the imposing ship Aquamarine cuts through the waters toward the dangerous open sea. The magical sealing circle integrated into the ship is activated, glowing intensely with a powerful and mysterious blue and purple energy. Using all its immense magical power, the ship heroically advances against the anomalies, sealing the rifts one after another amidst the rough waters. An explosion of blinding light occurs with each completed sealing, scattering intense elemental energy across the entire vastness of the ocean. Back then, the rank A group counted on formidable warriors nearly in the transcendent realm who, led by Njord, sealed 4 rifts in less than a month. Back on the ship, one of the counselors contacts Njord asking him to return immediately to the city, warning about the decrease in safety rifts. The messenger complains that the mood in the trading city is getting terrible due to the lack of work and monsters for adventurers to hunt because of the sealings. Ignoring the complaints, Njord lets him know he will return only after sealing the last large magical rift called Charybdis, which is the largest and most dangerous of all. The captain shows a serious look and is totally determined to fulfill his mission of protecting the seas. Regardless of the greedy opposition from the city, Njord convincingly states that it is precisely because it is the largest magical rift that they need to seal it urgently to avoid a worse catastrophe. The large vessel advances with courage and begins to be swallowed by the gigantic and terrifying vortex of red energy from the Charybdis rift. The flashback ends, returning the narrative focus to the beautiful and serene night on the ship's deck. Sailing calmly beneath the moonlight, Leonard calmly asks if something bad ended up happening inside there, but Francis replies that at the time, the Aquamarine group was unbelievably strong. However, the young captain's expression becomes visibly melancholy and sad as she continues remembering the story of her late father. With a light sigh, she whispers with certain nostalgia that the group indeed used to be extremely powerful and respected by everyone in the past. Back in the memory, the crew joyfully celebrates upon successfully sealing the Charybdis rift. Celebrating that they could finally return home, Njord agrees relieved and thoughtfully reflects that the sealing of that colossal rift should drastically delay the entire demonization process of that maritime region. With a slight, tired smile, he comments that they will probably get a tremendous scolding and complaints from the council leaders when they step on dry land. He jokingly comments that his dear daughter must also be furious for them taking an entire week, calling Francis, who was joyfully walking on the deck. Little Francis opens a beautiful, radiant smile and with extreme joy asks her father if he was finally coming back home for good with them. But before he could finish answering, a devastating and treacherous explosion of flames hits the ship by surprise, spreading panic and destruction. The crew screams in desperation as they spot amidst the fire the gigantic and threatening ship Moby Dick. The main vessel belonging to the treacherous counselor Pablo Njord is left completely furious and horrified to realize they fell into a cowardly ambush planned by Pablo since the start of that sealing mission. Amidst the chaos of burning wood, little Frances calls out, startled to her father while being closely protected by her loyal bodyguard Marion's body wounded. Njord desperately orders Marion to protect his daughter and tells the crew to sail at maximum speed toward the docks to save the ship. The captain angrily reflects that if they can just reach the city's public docks, the council won't dare attack them so openly in front of everyone. He orders all remaining fighters to intercept the Moby Dick's advance, personally leaping weapon in hand to face the horde of invading enemies. Pablo coldly orders them to crush the Aquamarine group's will to fight right then and there, mocking the useless pride of the captain who preferred to fall rather than yield to greed. Totally infuriated by the villain's cynicism, Njord shouts, telling him to shut up while channeling all his golden magical energy into his powerful blade. With tears of pride and fury in his eyes, the captain vows that the Aquamarine group's unshakable honor and determination will never be erased by that betrayal. He shouts with all his might that his ideals will be passed forward even if he falls right there, while Marion runs desperately carrying little Francis. A devastating rain of magical bombardments and missiles violently explodes across the entire length of the deck, destroying and setting fire to everything they find in their path. Back in the present, Frances silently weeps remembering her father's terrible sacrifice, stating with a heavy heart that this is why she will never give up. She dries her tears and lets him know that the city of Atlantis itself is their true enemy, understandingly saying that if Leonard wants to leave the group, he can, without hesitating even for a fraction of a second. The blonde youth gives a slight and sincere smirk and firmly and directly replies that he doesn't intend to go anywhere. The former recruit gazes at the vastness of the ocean ahead of him and calmly confesses that having the opportunity to cross swords against powerful opponents is all he desires most. With an extremely sharp gaze and a confident smile on his face, he implacably concludes that if those opponents are trash that deserves no mercy, even better. Frances gazes at him in silence for a brief instant, moved and a bit surprised by the unshakable determination demonstrated by the young man. She suddenly lets out a genuine and joyful laugh, warmly commenting that he truly is someone incredible in several aspects. With a lighter tone of voice, she asks if he will continue to follow her from then on as an official member of the Aquamarine group. Leonard replies with a beautiful smile on his face that yes, affectionately stating that he will be counting entirely on her care. The next day, under the morning sunshine, the Aquamarine group's ship appears docked in a different port of the coastal region. On the vessel's deck, Leonard begins to train in a focused manner, delivering swift and precise strikes with his large silver sword. At the same time, Ninian trains her aim with mastery, firing swift barrages of brilliant green energy, magical arrows. Marion also participates in the intensive training, leaping with her sword raised against Leonard while he carefully analyzes her movements. Leonard blocks the attacks with total ease, praising his two companions by saying that this was their first practice, but that they did very well. He lowers his sword in a quiet manner and announces to the group that the day's intensive training is officially over for today. Marion looks at him panting while the blonde youth seriously explains that the combat partnership between the two will be indispensable for their journey. Ninian listens closely as the young man points out that the two are constantly improving their movement patterns and their skills. However, the group's moment of peace is interrupted when some unknown men appear before them in an intimidating manner. Benjamin, the person responsible for Bermuda's rank A hall, analyzes the papers and comments in surprise that it apparently is true that the blonde youth defeated Conrad. He highlights with extreme surprise that Leonard was able to face on equal terms Marion and Ninian, who are considered the top of rank. The evaluator admits that with Vivian's entry, the group possesses true rank A power, but hesitantly ponders that they still have a major problem. He gazes at Francis seriously and directly says that, despite the great fighting power, the Aquamarine group currently has too few members. Although their power is enough for the rank promotion, Benjamin warns that they lack members to start activities, and Francis asks how many they need. The evaluator firmly raises 2 fingers of his hand and directly answers that the group needs 2 more members. He guarantees that if at least 2 more members join the team, the Aquamarine group will receive the official promotion to the prestigious rank A on the spot. Given this important condition, Francis and Leonard decide to walk through the streets of a busy port zone of the city in search of new recruits. Francis comments on the strange energy there, but the blonde youth guarantees that if they can convince the target, he will be of help, until a voice orders them to stop. Leonard immediately turns his face attentively, instantly detecting the hostile presence that just blocked their path in the alley. A group of armed bullies blocks their path, and a man with a bandaged face and holding a trident asks if they know where they are. A short-haired henchman angrily shouts, warning that this alley is Brother Galano's official territory and that this is no place for brats to be walking around. He tells them to turn around and get lost from there immediately, threatening that they will show no mercy to anyone simply for being young. The henchman furiously advances, delivering a punch against Leonard, but the blonde youth demonstrates frightening reflexes and blocks the big guy's punch with extreme ease. Leonard looks at him seriously and firmly warns that they didn't come there to fight, but that if the bullies draw their weapons, he won't hesitate to react with a swift dodging movement. The young man applies a precise sweep and launches the big guy's heavy body through the air without the slightest effort. The man lets out a loud groan of pain upon violently colliding on his back against the alley's sandy ground, completely disoriented by the boy's strength. The defeated henchman looks terrified behind him, while his bandaged leader, who remained quiet, takes a firm step forward to take over the dispute. The mysterious leader handles his trident with tremendous speed and precision, delivering a powerful charge that forces Leonard to use his arms to defend himself. The heavy strike collides directly against the young man's block, generating a loud crash that kicks up dust from the ground due to the weapon's strong impact. The blonde youth coldly analyzes the exchange of blows, mentally admitting that the attacks of that mysterious opponent are indeed very fast and heavy. Pulling the metal chain attached to his heavy spear, the opponent comments that the blonde youth must be quite famous as someone strong in those parts. The mysterious warrior spins the weapon, creating a cutting vortex, but Leonard nimbly leaps over the chain to perfectly dodge the entire charge. He arrogantly claims that for a seasoned mercenary who risks his life in real battles daily, the boy's fighting level is nothing more than a mere joke. He spins his trident with extreme force, preparing to deliver one more deadly charge, under Francis's tense gaze as she watches the fight up close. Leonard lands softly on the ground and quietly answers back to the warrior that he was actually thinking the exact same thing about him. Francis widens her eyes and, completely perplexed with surprise upon recognizing the opponent's fighting style, shyly questions if he could be Mr. Galano. The bandaged warrior is immediately shocked and, recognizing her, asks if she would be little Francis from his childhood, commenting in surprise how much she grew. Leonard calmly asks if that man is the famous Galano, the whale hunter, and Francis contentedly confirms that he is precisely who they were looking for. The veteran mercenary adjusts his bandana and intriguingly asks what they want with him. So suddenly, after so many entire years without seeing each other, Francis seriously explains that she wishes to rebuild the Aquamarine group with honor and states that for that, she needs the help of Galano, the guild's legendary hero. She makes reference to the past group's mythical legend, remembering Njord and the famous epithet of Stormy Tusk that used to inspire everyone. Francis reveals that Galano is her late father's own brother, and earnestly begs him to help them in this important mission to rebuild the group. She desperately asks for him to join them, guaranteeing that with his immense strength, they will recover their former glory as heroes in the blink of an eye. However, the young women's expectations are crushed when the veteran coldly refuses and gruffly orders Francis to leave there immediately. He turns his back and seriously explains that in the past, the true enemy that destroyed their group was not just the Moby Dick, but rather the entire city of Atlantis itself. He questions if she really expects him to manage to do something that not even his own brother was capable of, and concludes by bitterly saying he is sorry, but he won't help. Galano takes a firm step and convincingly states that he flatly refuses to follow that uncertain path. As he walks away with his injured men, Galano advises Francis to forget about this idea and seek another path, suggesting they talk about something better next time. Francis, crestfallen, laments Galano's definitive refusal, admitting she already imagined how difficult it would be to convince him to join the group. She widens her eye in surprise upon hearing Leonard's voice, asking her to wait a bit before giving up on everything. To the amazement of Francis, who tries to stop him, Leonard quickly runs ahead, wielding a spear toward Galano. The blonde youth makes an impressive leap through the air, charging from above with the spear toward the veteran who was walking away. Galano notices the boy's sudden approach and turns abruptly, calling him crazy for trying to attack him from behind. Nimbly, Galano uses his own trident to block Leonard's aerial charge, starting a rapid and tense physical combat. Leonard firmly declares that if Francis's words were not enough, he will use the strength of his own fists to convince him. Leonard executes an acrobatic maneuver, delivering a powerful charge from above that generates a large impact on the ground around. The strong impact of the collision kicks up a massive cloud of dust and makes a ringing crash echo through the entire port area. Leonard lands in a soft and controlled manner onto the stone floor, keeping his combat stance firm. He points out that Galano refuses to follow an uncertain path, but ironically says the veteran seems unable to see his own path. Galano rests on his knees on his trident, cursing Leonard in frustration at the skill demonstrated by the blonde youth. Panting from the physical effort, Galano faces Leonard seriously and asks what the boy thinks he is trying to do with that. Leonard stays at a safe distance and calmly states that he will show him the true path he should follow. He begins to skillfully spin the spear in his left hand to demonstrate his skills, determined to prove his point. Mentally, Leonard recognizes that his techniques with the spear are inferior to those with the sword, but believes they will be enough to provoke his opponent. Leonard notices that Galano's strength is genuine when the veteran seriously prepares, wrapping chains around his arms and wielding the trident. Annoyed at being challenged with a spear, Galano warns the youth not to underestimate him and challenges him to wager his own life in the combat. The two warriors collide their weapons with extreme force, generating a flash of sparks and sharp metallic noises echoing through the area. One of the weapons spins at high speed in the air. After one of the violent exchanges of blows between the two combatants, Leonard nimbly dodges beneath a heavy attack from Galano, keeping himself in constant motion to avoid the trident and the chains. Galano is surprised and tense to realize that the blonde youth seems to be anticipating and predicting each of his attacks in a precise manner. Taking advantage of an opening, Leonard delivers a precise and powerful kick to Galano's chest, forcing the veteran to back down while cursing. Leonard praises Galano's basic spear technique, but adds a provocation saying that this is only worth anything if he hasn't neglected his practices. Infuriated, Galano advances, delivering a heavy blow, but Leonard blocks the attack with his spear's handle with extreme precision. Asking if the boy is going to shut his mouth, Galano frantically attacks with a swift sequence of trident strikes to try and break him. Galano vents, yelling with pain that his brother and master, who was the one who showed him the right direction to follow, has already passed away and left him alone in the world. In the middle of his fury and venting, the veteran is caught by surprise by something unexpected and widens his eyes, confused. An imposing and mystical spiritual silhouette appears behind Leonard, giving instructions to correct the advance and attack with more depth. Following the instructions, Leonard adjusts his grip, keeping his hand half closed to release all the force. Only at the moment of the strike's rotation, Leonard's hand firmly closes around the spear's wooden handle, concentrating all the energy for the final impact. He executes a devastating thrust, generating a powerful spiraling vortex of golden energy that advances toward Galano. Galano observes in absolute shock the magnitude of the attack, while the violent gust of wind from the energy cuts the air before his face. The force of the impact leaves a deep, cracked rift in the paved floor, while both combatants remain motionless, observing the destruction. Galano lowers his head reflectively and murmurs, surprised, seeming to finally understand something very significant with that blow. The veteran states that he feels as if the time that was stagnant inside him finally started to run again after witnessing that technique. With a serene expression, Galano sincerely thanks him for the practice and humbly asks if Leonard could teach him a bit more. Leonard flashes a slight smile and promptly answers yes. Accepting to continue the teaching without any hesitation, Leonard positions himself and encourages him to come with everything, guaranteeing he will be his practice opponent until the veteran gets tired. The scene shows the external facade of the large industrial warehouses at the port under the bright sunshine that begins to rise in the sky. Sometime later, Galano and Leonard walk side by side back in a peaceful and friendly manner through the local stone streets. Galano raises his look surprised upon hearing a voice warmly calling his name just ahead. Francis approaches with a radiant smile and contentedly comments that the veteran's expression looks much more joyful and lighter. Now Galano admits with satisfaction that he found an excellent master in the blonde youth, confessing that it had been a long time since he was defeated like that and that this cheered him up. Leonard praises Galano's potential, stating that he will be an excellent combatant and that maybe he can come to surpass his own late brother Francis, is amused to note how men make friends just by trading blows, and internally ponders how rare it is to see Leonard praising someone in that manner. Leonard thoughtfully agrees with the comment, honestly admitting that it also had been a long time since he himself had fun in a fight like that. Taking advantage of the relaxed and friendly mood, Francis smiles with determination and decides to make her proposal to Galano once more. Francis compares the situation to that of her late father, Njord, and expresses the desire to welcome Galano as the newest official member of the team. Francis extends her hand in a welcoming gesture and makes the direct invitation for him to officially join the Aquamarine group. Laughing in a relaxed way, Galano shakes Francis's hand and confesses that, after everything that happened, it would be impossible to refuse the invitation, placing his right hand over his chest. Galano makes a solemn oath in the name of the sea to never back down before any storm. As a rank B adventurer, Leonard contentedly observes the new alliance, reflecting that now the group is just a step away from reaching the requirements for the rank A promotion. While the trio walks out of the warehouses, Leonard ponders that now it only remains to recruit one more member, preferably a mage. The scene focuses on determined steps echoing softly through the wooden floor of an elegant internal room. Elder Russell and Miss Esther enter the ship Aquamarine, praising the local luxurious structure. While commenting on the master's unexpected visit, Francis expresses deep surprise upon recognizing the two important figures who just appeared on her ship. She respectfully asks what would have motivated the sudden arrival of two people of such relevance to that place. Russell apologizes for the unannounced visit and reveals having heard rumors that the group's goal upon rising in rank is to investigate the mysterious rifts. He explains that the rifts are his main research focus and that, as an academic, he needs samples provided by adventurers. Upon hearing that the sample supplies suddenly stopped, Leonard suspiciously reflects whether this interruption could be Pablo's or the Union Council's doing. Russell theorizes that the person responsible is deliberately withholding the byproducts from the rift explorations to try and manipulate market prices on purpose. Francis seeks to understand the final purpose of that conversation. Inquiring what would be the exact reason for the elder's visit on that day, Russell snaps his black-gloved fingers in a confident and expressive gesture to emphasize his proposal. He proposes to continue his research aboard the ship while helping with explorations, promising that his presence will help secure much more than just ordinary byproducts. Stammering with surprise, Francis says he is extremely welcome, but asks if he really is absolutely sure about making this decision. Although Russell cannot be considered an official combat member, it is explained that he will travel on the ship as a guest researcher. Esther adds that Russell possesses excellent combat capability and a cooperative spirit, making him a formidable ally for the guild whenever necessary. Esther turns to the evaluator Benjamin and questions if these new conditions wouldn't already be more than enough to validate the group. Benjamin analyzes his clipboard and agrees that the group's combat power is flawless, noting that no one would dare attack a ship carrying the Chief Elder. Benjamin officially hands Francis the list containing the rifts that are currently available to be explored, and she shyly thanks him. Eager to start the missions, Francis enthusiastically asks if they can already depart immediately toward the indicated rifts. Benjamin briefly closes his eyes and nods positively, confirming that they indeed are already authorized to depart. The group says goodbye while receiving sincere wishes of good luck for the upcoming battles they will face as members of the Aquamarine group. The scene shows the imposing merchant ship sailing in a stable manner over the crystal-clear blue waters of the vast ocean. With its large white sails fully open, the ship cuts through the waves under the radiant light of a sunny day. Galano, now with a clean appearance and without his usual bandana over his eyes, shyly regrets not being able to properly greet all his companions before the departure. Francis laughs awkwardly and amiably comments that Galano's impatient way remains exactly the same as when they were younger. She makes a brief reflective pause while, observing the determination stamped on her new companions' faces, Francis praises Galano's decisive attitude, stating that it is a true honor to meet him again and that everyone will be surprised by his return. He assumes a more serious stance and asks where the group is sailing at the moment, wanting to know what their first destination is. Leonard consults the reports and explains the mission specifications, detailing that the target has spatial scale C and overall rank B difficulty. The blonde youth supplements the analysis seriously, warning that the estimated danger level for the raid is rated as B+. The final destination is revealed as the rift located in the 5th Maritime Area, also known as the feared lair of the dangerous sea orcs. Inside the lair's darkness, several monstrous green-skinned orc creatures with glowing red eyes roar in a fierce and threatening manner. The ship approaches the glowing whirlpool that serves as the entrance to the rift portal, officially classified with rank B difficulty. Before the vastness of the rift wrapped in electrical lightning, someone impressively comments that the place is much larger than they had imagined. Leonard thoughtfully analyzes the environment, noting that the rift looks a bit different from the information received, but evaluates that this won't be a hindrance. Francis confidently smiles, seeing that all the warriors on board are properly prepared to start the combat. Francis explains that the initial goal of the exploration is reconnaissance, aiming to provide actual joint combat experience for the guild's new formation. She delegates the strategic combat positions, determining that Galano will take the vanguard and Ninian will provide support right behind in the rearguard. Miss Esther is tasked with providing full and versatile support to the entire team. During tactical movement, Francis reveals that the mission command will belong entirely to Leonard, praising his tactical judgment capability that surpasses anyone else's there. She imposes a strict safety condition, instructing that if there is any objection to Leonard's decisions, the team must immediately retreat. With the preparations finalized, Leonard quietly murmurs while moving toward the ship's edge to leap into the water. Francis enthusiastically encourages the youth while observing him take the first step toward the rift's water vortex. The blonde youth coldly lets them know he will go ahead to clear the path for the other teammates. Galano immediately jumps and runs in a rush, trying to stop him, startled by the boy's sudden and impetuous initiative to jump. First, Leonard rapidly falls toward the rift, while Galano shouts from up there for him not to be in such a rush. The youth hits the rift water, generating a large impact and kicking up a powerful column of magical splashes. The other members fall right after and panic upon realizing they are falling from the sky toward an unknown tropical island. Leonard shouts Esther's name so she acts fast. While the mage apologizes, startled by the unexpected event during the fall, Esther swiftly summons her ice magic to create a solid platform over the water before everyone collides against the sea. A massive structure of ice crystals abruptly appears and instantly freezes the surrounding sea surface. Leonard lands with extreme lightness and precision onto the sturdy hexagonal ice surface newly created by Esther, holding the mage Esther in his arms. Leonard relieved comments that he didn't expect to fall straight into the middle of the sea, while the others land safely. Ninian seriously warns that they almost fell as soon as they entered the rift, emphasizing the need for everyone to stay extremely watchful. Suddenly, the elf archer widens her eye in an absolute state of alert upon detecting an immediate threat approaching Leonard, and the others prepare for combat while a large mass of water violently agitates right before them. A massive and muscular sea orc emerges roaring from the water depths, wielding its spear in a totally aggressive manner. Several other orcs mounted on killer whales emerge simultaneously, throwing a rain of harpoons and spears against the group. With fast reflexes, Leonard uses his sword techniques to precisely deflect the deadly projectiles thrown by the monsters. Observing the number of enemies around, the blonde youth quickly estimates that there are approximately a few dozen sea orcs there. The vast ice field cracks and shakes under the force of the gigantic waves generated by the killer whale's agile movements. The Sea Orc army relentlessly and coordinatedly advances, emitting fierce roars while trying to surround the adventurers. Ninian nimbly prepares her bow, noticing with concern that the creature's obvious intention is to surround them on all sides. While Ninian fires her precise arrows from the rear guard, Galano impetuously advances, delivering a heavy blow with his trident. Galano points out that the enemies individually are not that strong, but warns that fighting over the water's instability puts them at a severe disadvantage. Esther begs for 5 more minutes to prepare her next magic, without noticing that a colossal orc appears like a shadow behind her. The colossal orc glares closely at the mage with its reddish eyes and prominent teeth, letting out a terrifying grunt. Leonard appears in the blink of an eye and takes down the monster, instructing Esther to hurry up while leaving the flank defense under the other's responsibility. The blonde youth rushes off at high speed, running directly over the water surface, distancing himself from the rest of the group. Galano looks incredulous seeing the boy run freely over the waves, while Ninian just smiles, saying he always surprises them running swiftly through the waters. Leonard maps out his mental strategy of defeating the enemy leader first to disrupt the army's morale. He locates a creature even larger than the others on the beach and questions if that would indeed be the sea orc's leader. Sword in hand and with a focused look, Leonard prepares to start the direct confrontation against the imposing monster. However, the blonde youth is caught by surprise by a sudden change in the trajectory of the monster's attack and widens his eye in alert. The sea orc's leader easily handles a heavy and robust metal chain to try and subdue the young man. The powerful chain attack forcefully collides against Leonard's blade, generating a strong impact that kicks up dirt and dust around, deflecting with mastery. Leonard dodges the deadly trajectory of the heavy metallic chain, passing right by him. He runs at high speed, zigzagging through the attacks to quickly approach the enemy's unprotected body. The fierce orc angrily snarls and prepares one more strong charge, swiftly spinning his chain to crush the boy. The heavy chain violently cuts through the air, leaving a trail of cutting wind due to the strike's extreme speed. Leonard executes a perfect rotation maneuver with his weapon, canceling the destructive momentum of the enemy charge. In a swift movement, the heavy chain ends up wrapping around the handle of a wooden structure, limiting the orc's movements. Taking advantage of the monster's loss of mobility, Leonard leaps high and delivers a shattering sword strike from top to bottom. The orc leader grunts, confused in his final moments, while Leonard mentalizes that he will have to teach Galano how to deal with this type of opponent. With a precise and devastating cut of his sword, the blonde youth completely annihilates the sea orc's leader. Galano smirks and confidently comments that he already knows what to do even without the young man needing to remind him about not throwing his weapon away for nothing. With immense brute strength, Galano delivers a crushing blow that throws far away one of the last surviving orcs who dared challenge him. The wind softly blows over the beach of the mysterious green island after the violent battle has finally come to an end. Esther shockingly observes the beach and impressively comments that the entire enemy army was completely wiped out in a matter of seconds. Ninian aloud ponders that, although they defeated the enemy scouts group, now they need to decide which direction to follow on the island. In a sudden manner, Leonard begins to pant with sharp pains in his chest, while a dark reddish aura envelops him, startling Ninian. Sweating from pain and with clenched teeth, he murmurs with extreme difficulty about the sharp sting he is feeling in his heart. Leonard realizes that the accelerated heartbeat and the pain are actually a warning that something terrible resides in the depths of that island. The youth senses the approach of a disaster of catastrophic proportions looming, hidden at some point in the rift. Tightening his shirt fabric against his chest with force, he fills himself with determination, aware that it is his duty to stop this imminent catastrophe. Leonard gazes at the dark entrance of a cave wrapped in a reddish aura and suspects that the origin of the danger is hidden inside there. He recognizes the gravity of the situation, mentally estimating that, in terms of brute force, the threat there is even worse than Conrad's with the secret elixir. The others run to Leonard asking what happened, and the youth breaks the tension saying it's nothing serious, but that they need to discuss something. He directly reveals to his companions that he managed to successfully locate the exact position of the rift's core. Galano, Ninian, and Esther react with deep surprise and astonishment before the youth's sudden revelation. Esther questions if he really refers to the core generating the rift, hesitantly pondering that normally it shouldn't be something so easy to find. Leonard explains that he can sense the location and warns that if they proceed, they will face the Guardian, suggesting they can return to Francis if they prefer. He recalls the order stipulated by Francis that if at least one member made an objection, the operation would be immediately aborted. Breaking the silence with determination, Ninian firmly declares that she wishes to continue and go forward in the exploration. She explains that she prefers to test her arrow's effectiveness against truly powerful opponents, rather than just taking down weak enemies along the path. Galano enthusiastically supports the decision, stating that he will put his life on the line and that this is what makes everything a true combat. Feeling the pressure of the moment, Esther hesitantly stammers, while trying to organize her own thoughts on what to do. Mentally, she reminds herself that she is just an academic and wouldn't need to risk her life, but feels a strong internal conflict. Sighing, she yields to her own scientific interest in the rifts, joking that she will use the mission's success to brag before her master. Flashing a slight smile of satisfaction, Leonard concludes that the decision is made by common agreement of all of them. Wielding their swords, the blonde youth asks if everyone is really ready, warning that the approaching fight will be difficult. The group cautiously advances through the dark and damp ruins of the underground cave, where the sound of water drops falling echoes through the walls. Impressed by the place's architecture, Galano compares the environment to an ancient temple and comments how surprising it is to see such a place inside a rift. Esther confesses she finds the environment somewhat terrifying and senses that some threat may emerge from the shadows at any instant. A massive orc hidden by the shadows observes Esther from above, silently preparing to deliver a surprise attack. Realizing the hostile movement above, she startle shouts for everyone to be careful, warning about the imminent ambush. Several monstrous orcs leap from the stone columns toward the group, wielding their axes with fury. A swift and brilliant sword energy trajectory cuts through the cave's dark air to restrain the creature's advance. Leonard commands Galano not to let any enemy pass through there, and the bearded warrior blocks a charge, stating he will take care of it. Leonard quickly shouts to Ninian, ordering her to eliminate the enemy shooter positioned at the top of the stone column. The elf archer promptly answers that she understood the order and readies her aim toward the indicated target. She fires a swift sequence of accurate arrows, hitting and neutralizing the enemies, providing cover from high up in the ruins. Galano masterfully brands his trident, delivering circular cuts that keep the invading orcs away. Feeling the numerical pressure, Galano exclaims that there are too many opponents and that he won't be able to contain them alone for long. Esther nervously ponders that, although she can use destructive magic, the enemies are too close and her allies would be hit by the crossfire. Pressured and sweating from nervousness, the mage anxiously questions herself on what action to take to resolve that dilemma. Leonard suddenly appears, piercing an orc's chest with his sword, and calmly tells Esther not to hesitate to act. The blonde youth supplements with total firmness that she must place full trust in her companion's defense capabilities present there. He suggests she utilize a magic that becomes even more effective according to the size of the enemy horde, asking if she possesses such a technique. The idea makes Esther's eyes widen as she understands the strategy. Mentioning the powerful chain lightning spell, Esther warns Galano that the magic will hurt a bit, and the veteran answers that he doesn't mind, as long as he manages to keep the monsters away from him. Concentrating her magical energy, Esther begins to channel currents of bluish electricity around her arms and hands. Galano displays a fearless smile of determination and encourages the mage to release the attack to see how painful it will really be. Esther releases the powerful electrical discharge that rapidly propagates through the entire orc horde, electrocuting them simultaneously. Several orcs roar in pain under the paralyzing and devastating effect of the electrical magic running through their muscular bodies. With the end of the attack, Leonard rests his foot upon a defeated orc's head and calmly asks if the confrontation is already over. Leonard takes advantage of the situation to instruct the group, explaining that when fighting against large groups of enemies, each one must focus strictly on their tactical role. He points out with wisdom that a single highly effective and well-coordinated movement is capable of completely turning the course of a difficult battle. Galano analyzes his hand and comments surprised that, due to the rapid propagation of electricity through the enemies, he barely suffered any damage. Esther praises Galano's high physical resistance, joyfully stating that a warrior of his level easily withstands that level of magic. Leonard emphasizes the importance of this perfect tactical coordination and guides the group to continue heading down the stairs toward the core of the rift. Small sparks of residual blue energy intermittently snap over the damp rocks of the depths. Leonard delivers a swift charge that neutralizes the last traces of threat in the corridor, confirming that the area is clear. Suddenly, Ninian interrupts the walk and asks with extreme seriousness for everyone to keep absolute silence. Before them, at the back of a massive ruined hall, the colossal and terrifying silhouette of the Rift Guardian rests imposingly before a large stained glass window. The image highlights the facial details of the colossal Rift Guardian, a bluish-skinned demonic being keeping its hands joined in a prayer posture. Esther concentrates her energy in a focused manner. Uttering enchantment words to gather the electricity around her, she casts an electrical storm spell, thinking that the Rift Guardian's meditative posture offers the perfect opportunity for a surprise attack. However, a monstrous silhouette suddenly emerges stealthily, leaping from above toward the unprotected mage. The monster, an orc with a horn adornment on its head and a skull necklace, advances by surprise with a sadistic look and sharp teeth. Exposed blood violently splatters before Esther, who retreats in an absolute state of shock and dread at the sudden scene. Leonard appears at the exact moment, delivering a deadly cut against the invader, ironicizing that the monster wasn't the only one planning a surprise attack. Esther, relieved, observes Leonard's sword handle firm before her, while the youth keeps his flawless guard against new dangers. Executing an agile movement in the air, Leonard delivers additional swift cuts to neutralize any other immediate threat around. Suddenly, the blonde youth notices an abrupt change of energy and widens his eye in extreme surprise and alert. A colossal and overwhelming blast of bluish magical energy hits the place with extreme violence, generating a deafening crash. The Rift Guardian reveals itself totally imposing amidst the steam, glaring at the adventurer group with its glowing blue eyes. The strong impact leaves Leonard injured and bleeding from his mouth, while the beast's deafening roar eerily echoes through the massive stone chamber.